Chapter 69. It was such a coincidence. Ferdinand and Guan Weiwu looked at each other, then looked at the dejected Yu Qianzhou and felt that he was a poor child. Elder Ferdinand, can you refine another batch of foundation establishment pills with the spiritual herbs of your Wanfen garden? Feng Xiangtian asked. Guan Weiwu had asked the same question, but Ferdinand shook his head and said, there are a few, and there are still a few main ingredients that are not mature yet. They can't be used to refine pills at all. I'm afraid we still need to wait for another 2 years. Feng Xiangtian nodded and said, then there's no other way, but we didn't do a good job on this matter. You two elders are also responsible. Some things can't let the disciples be wronged. We still have to compensate them. How about this? Yu Qianzhou, what do you think about this? Feng Xiangtian pondered and said, in the next 3 years when the foundation establishment pills are distributed, in addition to the foundation establishment pill you deserve, you will get 1 more and then 1 more as compensation. I will give you 3 pills at a time. If you still can't build the foundation, it won't affect you getting 2 more chances in the future. What do you think? The 2 elders nodded in agreement to the sect leader's words. This deal was worth it. It meant that other people had 3 chances to reach the foundation establishment stage. Because Yu Qianzhou had effected his first attempt, he had obtained 5 chances. Basically, it could be said that his chances of reaching the foundation establishment stage were certain. I can get a total of 5 foundation establishment pills? Yu Qianzhou was stunned. It was good, but it was a pity to waste 3 years. These old guys had no concept of time. It couldn't be helped. They were people who lived for hundreds of years. In their eyes, 2 or 3 years was really nothing. However, things were already like this. The head had also made compensation. If he still didn't agree, it would be a bit too much. He could only salute and said, thank you, head. Okay, let's do it this way. Feng Xiangtian said and looked at the 3 people and asked, is there anything else? Since it was like this, the 3 people had nothing else to say. They naturally saluted and left. After leaving the Pinglai pavilion, Guan Weiwu, who had been silent for a long time, asked, Yu Qianzhou, are you willing to return to the elixir refining pavilion with me? After such a thing happened, Yu Qianzhou felt a little sad and replied, I will listen to master's arrangements. Just as Guan Weiwu was about to speak, he heard Ferdinand say, go back? Yu Qianzhou's matter is something neither you nor I can decide. Old Guan, if you want someone, you should talk to Jiugu yourself. Otherwise, if Jiugu sees me going back alone, the Slayer wand in her hand is not something to be trifled with. You won't be able to escape. Guan Weiwu was stunned. He looked at Yu Qianzhou and said, then you should go back to the mulberry garden first. We'll talk about the matter of returning to the Alchemy pavilion in the future. Don't worry, I'll remember everything. Got it, master. Yu Qianzhou nodded. Old Guan, I have to take Yu Qianzhou back to report to Jiugu. After Ferdinand finished speaking, he grabbed Yu Qianzhou and flew away. In a few moments, the 2 returned to the outside of the mulberry garden. Ferdinand dared to fly out with Yu Qianzhou, but he did not dare to fly in without permission. If he did that, it would be disrespectful to Ma Jiugu. The 2 of them walked back obediently. When he saw the old man, Ferdinand reported everything that had happened in full detail. After listening, Ma Jiugu looked at Yu Qianzhou, who had his head down, and then looked at Xianxia, who was staring at him with pity. She sighed and said, 3 years is not long for you young people, but for us old guys it's not short. But for us old fellows it's not a short time. I don't know how many more 3 years I can live. Elder Lon, who was accompanying her, said with a smile, Jiugu, you must be joking. With your profound cultivation, sooner or later you will step into the spirit-severing stage. At that time it won't be a problem for you to live for thousands of years. Bingxue is right. It's only a matter of time before you break through to the tribulation passing stage. Ferdinand also smiled and flattered. Ma Jiugu shook her head and said, the great way is ruthless. It's really rare for someone to step into the spirit-severing stage in the cultivation world. I know you're saying good things, but I've lived for more than 500 years and I know my own situation. I don't have any extravagant hopes. I just hope that the younger generation can have that day. After saying that, she looked at Xianxia and Yu Qianzhou kindly. From the old woman's words, if she couldn't make a breakthrough in her cultivation, she was afraid that she would not be far from death. Yu Qianzhou looked up and wanted to comfort her by saying that she would live for a long time. However, when he thought that she had already lived for a long time, he couldn't say it. There was a short silence in the hall. It's all Ferdinand's fault. Otherwise, our Yu Qianqiu might be able to reach the foundation building stage today. Lan Bingxue complained to Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu had also become Yu Qianqiu. Obviously, he knew what the old woman meant and treated him as one of their own. Ferdinand wanted to explain, but he was speechless when he saw the old woman. Alright, you can't blame Ferdinand for this. You have a lot of things to do. Go back and do your own thing. Ma Jiugu said. Ferdinand thought that it would be awkward to stay here. After bowing to Ma Jiugu, he patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder to comfort him and left. To be honest, after this incident, Yu Qianqiu didn't know why the people in the mulberry garden valued him so much, but he felt everyone's kindness. Although there was still a bit of self-protection in his subconscious, he finally felt a little bit of humanity in the mulberry garden. Yu Qianqiu, you have suffered a lot. Now you have to wait for the next 3 years. Ma Jiugu said regretfully, it's a pity that the spirit herbs in the mulberry garden are not mature yet. Otherwise, I will personally refine a furnace of foundation building pills to help you break through to the foundation building stage in one fell swoop. Suffering a lot? Not at all. People are animals with feelings. It was enough to hear the old woman's words. But he couldn't afford to wait. Ong Guangtsung and Chu Pingou, who had been waiting for his arrival with great longing. Although he had never said it to anyone, it was a solemn promise a man made to a woman. It was a promise to a woman who treated him sincerely. It was a promise he didn't dare to break. It was not about whether he was a cultivator or whether he loved her or not. If he was a real man, he must fulfill his promise to that woman. This road was full of difficulties, but he must move forward bravely. He, Yu Qianqiu, dared to betray heaven and earth, but he didn't dare to betray someone who was sincere to him, especially a woman who was sincere to him. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back for the rest of his life. He wouldn't be able to eat or sleep well, and he wouldn't be able to rest in peace for the rest of his life. In his previous life, he was able to rise from a nameless nobody to a famous underworld boss. This was all because of his loyalty and commitment. This creed had been deeply ingrained in his bones and soul. This was the foundation that he absolutely did not dare to abandon. Otherwise, he would lose the meaning of living. It would be the same in this life. This was his fate. It was his Yu Qianqiu's life. How could he fulfill his promise with his current cultivation? A year had passed and now he had to wait for another 3 years? Even if he waited for a moment, it meant that Chu Ping'er had to wait for him for a moment, let alone waiting for another 3 years. His heart was uneasy and it was difficult for others to understand his heart. He suffered silently. There were some things that needed to be said. In the main hall, Yu Qianqiu suddenly knelt down in front of Ma Jiugu. Ah! Xianxia and Lan Bingxue exclaimed. Ma Jiugu, who was leaning on her walking stick, suddenly opened her drooping eyelids and said solemnly, Yu Qianqiu, why are you doing this? Chapter 70. There is a saying that men have gold under their knees and they should not kneel lightly. In his previous life he had never knelt before anyone. He had only knelt and cried in front of his deceased parents. In this life he had only knelt before his master. So what if he knelt again for a promise? Not to mention that the old lady was old enough to be his ancestor, so there was nothing wrong with kneeling. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, Disciple requests a favor from Jiugu. This matter is really difficult to speak of, so I have no choice but to kneel down and beg. Ma Jiugu's opened eyelids drooped again. She walked several steps with the help of her crutch. She stared at him and asked, What is it that makes you kneel down and beg? The other 2 women also stared at him. Damn it! Do you think I like kneeling? Yu Qianqiu thought for a while and said, I want to ask Jiugu for some spiritual herb seeds needed to concoct the foundation building elixir. Xianxia and Lan Bingxue were stunned. Both of them thought they had heard it wrong. It was understandable if he wanted foundation building pills, but if he wanted seeds, could it be that he wanted to plant his own spiritual herbs and concoct pills? There's no need for that. If he waited for more than 3 years, he would be able to obtain 3 foundation establishment pills in one go. Naturally, Ma Jiugu had also thought of the same thing. In fact, she had thought even more than them. Stand up and talk first. Ma Jiugu asked, Do you want to keep the seed or give it to someone else? She thought that maybe Yu Qianqiu was sent by another sect. Xianxia was slightly surprised. She had also thought of this possibility. She knew that Yu Qianqiu was from Ong Guangtsung, who liked to kneel. No one was born to be a slave. Yu Qianzhou stood up and said, this disciple wants it for himself. Ma Zhigu asked indifferently, grow your own spiritual herbs? Yes. You want to concoct a foundation-building pill yourself? Yes. Refine it for your own use? Yes. This old woman doesn't understand. You can obviously get 3 foundation establishment pills in 3 years, so why did you do this? Ma Zhigu turned around and asked, can you tell me why? Yu Qianzhou hesitated for a moment, then said resolutely, I promise. For a promise, otherwise I can wait 3 years. I still don't understand. You have stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time. You should know that it is very difficult to grow the several main ingredients of the building foundation pill. Even if you can grow it, even if I give you seeds, you won't be able to grow it in 3 years. If that's the case, you might as well wait another 3 years. I don't know if I'm muddle-headed, but I can't calculate this debt clearly. Yu Qianzhou, can you give me an explanation? Ma Zhigu gently poked the ground with her walking stick. Yu Qianzhou paused, then shook his head and said, this disciple can't explain it clearly. Naturally, he couldn't tell her the secret of the golden pearl. Oh, Ma Zhigu replied and walked a few steps with the help of her crutch. She stopped and said, you know the rules of Fuxian Island. Spirit grasses and seeds are not allowed to be spread to outsiders. Yu Qianzhou also knew the rules. While he was feeling dejected, Ma Zhigu said, speaking of which, you are also a disciple of Fuxian Island. Giving the seeds to you is not considered spreading them to outsiders. Giving the seeds to a disciple to grow privately is not something that has been done. But I can give it to you. Yu Qianzhou was stunned, and so were Xianxia and Lan Bingxue. The condition is that you can't spread the seeds of Fuxian Island to outsiders. If you don't abide by this rule, I will never give you the seeds, Ma Zhigu said with her back facing him. Yu Qianzhou was overjoyed and quickly said, this disciple will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone. He didn't expect that Ma Zhigu would agree. Good. You must remember what you said today. If you dare to violate it, not only will I be breaking the rules, but you will also be breaking the rules. At that time, even if you run to the ends of the earth, I will still crush your bones and scatter your ashes. Do you believe me? Ma Zhigu was old, but her indifferent words were filled with unquestionable confidence. With Ma Zhigu's cultivation level, Yu Qianzhou certainly believed that she had the strength to kill someone else. However, he had the golden bead, and the white fox, who was also in the late stage of passing tribulation, was also in the golden bead. No matter how confident she was, it was useless. However, it was completely unnecessary. Yu Qianzhou never thought of giving the seeds to others, so he immediately said cautiously, this disciple Yu Qianzhou swears to the heavens that I will absolutely not give the seeds to anyone, or I will die a horrible death. In the cultivation world, oaths were the most taboo. What cultivators did was originally in defiance of the heavens, and if they violated an oath, they would often have to obey an oath. This was not a joke. Don't agree too early. I still have something that I need you to agree to before I will give you the seeds. Ma Zhigu turned around and stared at him with a smile. There is still a condition? Yu Qianzhou slightly frowned, but he still respectfully said, Senior, please speak. Ma Zhigu looked at Xianxia and slowly said, since you are a person who attaches importance to promises, then this old woman wants a promise from you. As long as you agree to this old woman's promise, I will immediately give you the spiritual herb seeds. Promise? What promise? Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Xianxia and Lan Bingxue also looked at Ma Zhigu, not knowing what kind of promise she wanted. Ma Zhigu shook her head and said, promise this old woman first. Yu Qianzhou hesitated. How could he casually agree to this kind of thing? What if she asked him to die or something that he couldn't do? How could he agree to it? Ma Zhigu knew that he had misgivings, so she smiled and said, this old woman's promise is not difficult for you to fulfill, and it won't hurt you. Moreover, it will give you great benefits. Do you agree or not? Yu Qianzhou didn't believe in such a thing, but he couldn't resist the temptation of the spiritual herb seeds and timidly said, if it's really as Venerable Ma Zhigu said, then disciple Yu Qianzhou will naturally agree. Senior, please speak. But in his heart he added, if it's something I can't do, then don't blame me for going back on my words. Ma Zhigu rarely laughed and said, good. Since you agree, I also believe that you are a person who keeps your promise. As for what the promise is, we can talk about it later. Perhaps there is no need to say it in the future. I will naturally tell you when the time comes. You just need to remember that you owe me a promise. Xianxia and Lan Bingxue looked at each other, not knowing what this old woman was talking about. On the other hand, Yu Qianzhou felt strange and felt that there was a big conspiracy waiting for him. Ma Jiugu was very happy, so she poked him with her walking stick and said, "Little Las Lan, prepare 10 spiritual herb seeds for refining the foundation establishment pill and give them to him. Go now." Yes. Lan Bingxue went to get the seeds with a belly full of doubts. "Thank you, Venerable Ma Jiugu." Yu Qianzhou smiled awkwardly. Logically speaking, he should be happy after obtaining something he dreamed of. However, he couldn't bring himself to be happy. He didn't know if exchanging a promise for a spirit grass seed was a loss or a gain. For now, he could only take one step at a time. Not long after, Lan Bingxue came back with a small cloth bag and handed it to Yu Qianzhou. "Open it and see if it's what you want." Yu Qianzhou stuffed it into his storage bag without hesitation and said with a smile, "No need. How can it be wrong when Elder Lan personally took it? Disciple thanks Elder Lan." Lan Bingxue smiled and returned to Ma Jiugu's side. She and Xianxia were a bit confused. First of all, they didn't know why Yu Qianzhou wanted the seeds. Saying that he wanted to plant spiritual herbs didn't seem very credible. Moreover, Ma Jiugu's promise was also very confusing. After asking if there was nothing wrong, Yu Qianzhou left the inner garden. When he came out, he saw Hibiscus working. He didn't greet her and excitedly returned to the small house and disappeared. Chapter 71. Amidst the sea of flowers, 2 diligent gardeners were hard at work. The white fox, dressed in white, was strolling amidst the flowers not far away. From time to time she would bend over and smell the alluring fragrance. Guan Yu and Qin Feng would steal glances at her from time to time. After all, such a beautiful woman was rare. Not rare, but they had never seen one before. The two of them did not know that the white fox was a vixen. When the two of them first came here, they were quite conflicted. After a long time, they realized that accompanying such a beautiful woman and working in the sea of flowers every day was not necessarily a bad thing. There were no schemes, no disputes, and the two of them gradually got used to and began to enjoy life here. After spending a long time with the two of them, they became familiar with each other. The white fox also gradually began to talk to the two of them. Jing Jing walked to the two of them and saw that another piece of land had opened up. She looked around and suggested, "It's best if we can plant purple flowers here." "Alright, we'll listen to Miss White. Qin Feng, let's plant violet flowers here." Guan Yu laughed. Qin Feng agreed with a hum, then turned his head and asked, "Miss White, why haven't I seen boss in a long time?" He was now full of admiration for Yu Qianzhou. He had never seen such a talented young man. "I don't know," the white fox replied softly. She looked at the empty bamboo house in the distant forest, and a trace of disappointment appeared in her eyes. "What's wrong? Does everyone miss me?" "Huh." Yu Qianzhou suddenly appeared behind everyone and laughed. Guan Yu laughed as well. "Speak of the devil." This was a saying he realized when he listened to Yu Qianzhou talk about the 3 kingdoms. "Let's not talk about anything else. Yunchang, Qin Feng, don't plant these flowers in the future. I have something important for you to do." Yu Qianzhou laughed. Guan Yu and Qin Feng looked at the white fox suspiciously. Seeing that the latter did not object, Guan Yu asked, "What is it?" "Haha." Yu Qianzhou suddenly threw his head back and laughed. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing why he was so happy. However, the white fox seemed to hear a tinge of sadness in his laughter and looked at him quietly. After venting his anger through laughter, Yu Qianzhou patted Guan Yu's shoulder and said, "Yunchang, do you remember what I told you before? You talk too much. Which sentence do you want me to remember?" Guan Yu curled his lips and smiled. Yu Qianzhou was in a good mood today, so he didn't mind at all. "I've told you before that you'll be able to successfully build your foundation within 10 years. Guan Yu nodded and said, "Yes, but I have long since given up hope." Yu Qianzhou was taken aback. He rubbed his nose and sighed, "Sigh. Since you don't have any hope, then forget it. During this time I learned alchemy on supporting Immortal Island. It just so happened that I got the spiritual herb seeds needed to refine the foundation building pill today. Since you don't want it anymore, then Qin Feng and I will do it. Yunchang, you continue to plant your flowers." "What?" Guan Yu and Qin Feng were taken aback. Then they cried out at the same time, "Spiritual herb seeds? The two of them knew that any kind of plant seeds could be planted here. If there really were spiritual herb seeds, what would it mean? After all, Guan Yu had stayed on supporting Immortal Island before. He understood the situation better than Chen Feng. The spiritual herb seeds on supporting Immortal Island weren't something that could be easily obtained. He didn't have the ability to do it. Moreover, Yu Qianqiu said that he had learned alchemy. If it was someone else, a qi condensation disciple would only be doing odd jobs and wouldn't have the qualifications to learn alchemy. If what Yu Qianqiu said was true, then this big brother Yu really wasn't your average kind of powerful. Guan Yu was completely convinced. Chen Feng, let's go and find a place to plant the spiritual herb, Yu Qianqiu said proudly. Wait. Guan Yu grabbed Yu Qianqiu's arm. The latter smiled and said, Yuncheng, what's wrong? You still want to fight with me? You're overestimating yourself. No. Boss, you misunderstood. I just want to ask you a few questions. Guan Yu smiled apologetically. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I'm in a good mood today. Go ahead. Guan Yu grabbed his arm and didn't let go. Who did you worship when you entered supporting Immortal Island? The same surname as you, Guanwei Wu. Elder Guan is the elder in charge of the Alchemy Pavilion. It's possible that you can learn alchemy. Guan Yu gulped and asked again, then where did you steal the spiritual herb seeds from? Bullshit. Yu Qianqiu struggled to free his arm and said, do you think I'm the kind of person who would do such a thing? The seeds were personally given by Ma Jiugu from the Mulberry Garden. The legendary Jiugu who has reached the late stage of tribulation passing? Why would she give you the seeds? Guan Yu was surprised. What's so strange about that? I have a good relationship with her. I'm living in the Mulberry Garden now and eating well every day. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said, if you don't believe me, then forget it. I can't be bothered with you. Go plant your flowers. Chen Feng, let's go plant spiritual herbs. Wait. Guan Yu smiled apologetically and said, Boss, I was wrong. I shouldn't have doubted you. I'll accompany you to plant spiritual herbs. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and said with a proud smile, since we've known each other for so long, I won't argue with you. Quickly find a place and hurry up and start working. He didn't want to waste any more time teasing him. Moreover, he also wanted to plant the spiritual herbs as soon as possible. The white fox frowned slightly when she saw the jubilant expressions of the three of them. She did not believe that Yu Qianqiu had obtained these items easily like he had said. Otherwise, why would he have been so depressed over the past year without showing any signs of it? Boss, what do you think about planting it here? This is the land that Chen Feng and I have just plowed. Guan Yu nodded and pointed to the side of the land. This was the first time he talked to Yu Qianqiu like this. Moreover, it was so shameless. On the side, Chen Feng was so excited that he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. He kept rubbing his palms. Before he met Yu Qianqiu, he was worried about spirit stones. Unexpectedly, after coming here, spirit stones were so abundant that he didn't dare to use them even if he wanted to. Now he even had the opportunity to obtain a foundation establishment pill. After taking it, he could step into the foundation establishment stage. His old dream. Wait a moment. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand in a very magnanimous manner. Guan Yu and Chen Feng were stunned. They didn't know what this boss was going to do next. Yu Qianqiu held a small cloth bag in his hand and said with a serious expression, refining a foundation establishment pill requires 9 kinds of spiritual herbs. Ma Jiugu gave me 10 sets of seeds for each kind. Everyone must be careful. You can only try to plant it and not fail. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that I will get it again. Do you understand? Although he was suspected of taking this opportunity to increase his prestige, the two people involved didn't think so. Instead, they thought what he said was very reasonable. They also said with a serious expression, understood. The white fox, who was a few steps away, pursed her lips, turned her head and smiled sweetly. Yu Qianqiu carefully opened the cloth bag. There were 9 small porcelain bottles inside. He took out one and handed it to Chen Feng. Chen Feng, there should be 10 seeds inside. I also don't know what kind of spiritual herb it is. Try to plant one first. This was the seed of a spiritual herb used to refine a foundation establishment pill. Chen Feng's hands couldn't help but tremble. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and scolded, damn it. Useless thing, why are your hands trembling? If it breaks, can you afford to pay for it? Guan Yu, why are you in a daze? I'm talking to you. Don't just stand there and watch. Help Chen Feng plant it. Seeing him gesticulating and scolding to his heart's content, the white fox who had just turned her head turned back again. And, got it. Guan Yu immediately realized his mistake. He hurriedly took a bucket of water and squatted down to dig a small hole in the loose ground. He also untied the bamboo tube hanging on his waist and was ready to use it at any time. Chapter 72. Qin Feng removed the stopper from the small porcelain bottle and carefully poured a small seed into his palm. Then he plugged the stopper back in. The seed was gently placed into the small hole. Guan Yu quickly scooped out a spoonful of purple chaos from the bamboo tube and added it into the hole. Qin Feng quickly covered the hole with soil. Guan Yu scooped out a spoonful of water from a bucket and poured it over the hole. After doing all this, the two of them exhaled and subconsciously wiped their sweaty foreheads. Then they slowly stood up. The 4 pairs of eyes, including the white fox, stared intently at the small patch of ground that was soaked in water. After a long time, there was still no reaction from the small patch of ground. This was a little abnormal. Qin Feng and Guan Yu looked at each other. Yu Qianchou frowned and said, "How can this be? Did you notice anything unusual about the purple chaos and the water while you were planting the flowers?" Qin Feng shook his head and said, "No." "Quick look, there's a reaction," Guan Yu exclaimed in surprise. A few cracks quietly appeared on the small patch of ground that was previously wet. Everyone stared in surprise, but after waiting for a long time, there was another reaction. They saw a small white sprout poking its head out. Then it slowly grew at an extremely slow speed. This speed was almost negligible compared to the speed at which the flowers grew. "The speed is too slow. How can this be?" Yu Qianchou frowned and said, "Is there any way to make it grow faster?" "Yes." Guan Yu stared at the sprout and replied, "If we add more purple chaos, it should be able to speed it up. Boss, do you want to add it?" Yu Qianchou exhaled and said, "Let's do it. There are still 9 seeds left. The most we can just waste 1. Guan Yu nodded and pulled out a thin bamboo tube from his belt. Yu Qianchou took a closer look. It was a bamboo tube with a piston made using the syringe principle from his previous world. He couldn't help but smile. It seemed like these 2 guys were experienced in planting flowers. They must have sped up the growth of the flowers. With Qin Feng's help, the bamboo tube was filled with purple chaos. Guan Yu knelt down and carefully inserted the slender end of the tube into the soil under the white sprout. Then he slowly pressed the other end of the wooden handle down. As the purple chaos in the bamboo tube was completely poured into it, the sprout visibly trembled as if it had eaten something. Its growth rate also increased significantly. Guan Yu pulled out the bamboo tube and quickly covered the hole in the ground with soil. After standing up, he looked at the sprout and nodded. "Boss, it looks like we can still get another tube. Do you want another tube? Failure is the mother of success. Don't be afraid, just do it." Yu Qianchou agreed. Guan Yu and Qin Feng cooperated to give the sprout another injection. The effect was very obvious. Although it was still a lot slower than the flowers, it was still very fast. Guan Yu exclaimed, "Spiritual grass is indeed spiritual grass. It really is extraordinary. It has already used a dozen times more purple chaos than the flowers, but it is still growing slower than the flowers." The things that grew out of the sprout were not very good looking. Although it was still growing, it was only the size of a palm. It was still black and didn't look like a spiritual grass at all. Guan Yu and Qin Feng had never seen it before. Yu Qianchou said with a smile, "Qin Feng, this is the dirt-repelling grass. It is one of the essential spiritual grass for refining the building foundation dan. I will leave the bottle in your hand to you for safekeeping. In the future, this dirt-repelling grass will be planted by you. Remember to collect a lot of seeds. Don't let the seeds break. If they break, there will be no place to plant them." Qin Feng nodded. Not long after, a few flower stems came out of the dirt-repelling grass. The flower buds on top of the stems slowly rose up. When they reached a certain position, the flower buds swelled up from the black leaves. When the flower buds began to slightly open, a faintly discernible fragrance overflowed. It was this faintly discernible flower fragrance that completely suppressed the fragrance of the surrounding sea of flowers. It really is a spiritual grass. Just the fragrance of this flower has suppressed the fragrance of the thousands of flowers here. Qin Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. The white fox gently fanned her jade-like nose. She moved closer and took a deep breath. It seemed like she also liked this fragrance. The 6 flowers had completely bloomed. There were a few short golden hairs hidden in the pale white petals. It was very beautiful. Yu Qianqiu shouted in a deep voice. Yun Chong, balance the yin and yang. Pollinate the flowers. Don't waste even a single seed. He had already brought in a few hives of bees. However, because of the purple chaos, the flowers' flowering period was too short. Obviously, there wasn't enough time for the bees to pollinate it. Got it. Guan Yu's movements were light and quick as he pollinated the 6 flowers. He didn't pick one flower first and pollinate it like normal flowers. For this spiritual grass, wasting one flower meant wasting a lot of precious seeds. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the plucked seeds were already in Qinfeng's hands. This flower was also very strange. One flower could bear 6 seeds. 6 flowers were exactly 36 seeds. The few of them happily looked at the plucked seeds. Unfortunately, because of the purple chaos, the dirt-repelling grass didn't last long before it withered. However, the success of the dirt-repelling grass gave the 3 of them a lot of confidence. Yu Qianqiu tested the other 8 bottles one by one. In the end, he found out that ginseng was the easiest to plant. After it grew under the soil, no matter how much purple chaos he put in, it would only increase its age quickly. It wouldn't wilt. The seeds were even easier to pluck. Basically, it would flower and bear fruit once in a year. The seeds could be plucked many times. He also found some problems. It turned out that the diamond fruit was a vine plant. It wasn't easy to grow on flat ground. It needed to be in a place with trees so that it could be easily entangled. One plant could only bear 12 fruits. The fruits it bore were really worthy of the name diamond. Even with a sword, one could only leave a white mark on it. The most troublesome one was the lingji. When the porcelain bottle was opened, they only saw some powder inside. It wasn't a seed at all. The 3 of them were a little dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu had never come across this thing in the mulberry garden. He didn't know how to plant it. He regretted not asking Farong. Maybe she knew. It was all thanks to the white fox. She cultivated in the deep mountains and forests. She had seen a lot of things like this. With her explanation, the 3 of them finally understood. The lingji didn't matter if it was a seed or not. Once it was crushed, it would naturally become a seed. No wonder the porcelain bottle was filled with powder. This made Yu Qianqiu remember some knowledge from his previous life. This lingji should also be a kind of fungus. Finally, under the white fox's guidance, they succeeded in planting it next to the roots of the big tree. After each success, Yu Qianqiu finally let out a sigh of relief. He gave the 9 porcelain bottles to Guan Yu and Qinfeng. 3 days later, I'm going to start refining foundation building pills. I want 100 of each of the 9 kinds of spiritual plants. Can you guys grow them? Yu Qianqiu looked at the 2 of them. The 2 of them looked at each other. Guan Yu asked, "You want so many?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said solemnly, "I want to refine enough foundation building pills in one go. I don't believe that with a lot of foundation building pills, the 3 of us can't build our foundation successfully." In fact, the reason why he asked for so many was because he had never personally refined foundation building pills before. He didn't have the slightest confidence, so he was prepared to use spiritual plants to build them. He believed that even if he was lucky, he could still refine 1 or 2 batches. Hearing that they could refine enough foundation building pills, Guan Yu and Qinfeng were so excited that their eyes glowed green. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded. Guan Yu excitedly patted his chest and promised, "Boss, don't worry. Even if we don't eat or sleep for these 3 days, we'll help you grow those 100 batches." Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Good. When the time comes, we'll have enough foundation building pills. I believe we can definitely build our foundation successfully." Suddenly he frowned and said, "You two don't just ignore the quality of the spiritual plants just to make up the numbers. Especially the ginseng and the lingji. They must be at least 100 years old. Otherwise they can't be considered as spiritual plants." This was related to whether or not they could successfully build their foundation, so the 2 of them immediately promised again and again. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly went back. He still wanted to look for Xianxia in the next few days to improve his pill concocting skills. Chapter 73. The path leading from the river to the seaside was overgrown with weeds. Yan Zixiao and her great-granny would always fly through the air every time they came here. Ever since her great-granny handed Yu Qianqiu to her, she had never come here again. She knew what her great-granny was thinking. A man and a woman walked quietly by the river. Although it was not as fast as flying, Yan Zixiao was happy to walk slowly like this. The originally roadless river had already been vaguely stepped on by the two of them. Yu Qianqiu was always half a step behind her, his attitude very respectful. Walking in front, Yan Zixiao bit her lips. During the time they were together they had almost never talked about anything else. As they walked slowly she wanted to speak a few times, but once she opened her mouth she couldn't think of anything else. In the end she didn't say anything. She wanted to take the initiative to express goodwill, but because of her high and mighty status, she couldn't take the initiative to lower her stance. She wasn't used to doing this. Should she take the initiative or not? This question was constantly in her mind. Actually, Yu Qianqiu's mind was also spinning non-stop. He was thinking about how to ask Yan Zixiao. He had always been her assistant. He didn't know if she would agree to let him personally refine pills. Damn it. He had already done something as shameless as kneeling. Why would he be afraid of asking this? Yu Qianqiu cleared his throat and chuckled. Senior apprentice Aunt Yan. This disciple wants to ask you for a favor. Yan Zixiao hated this form of address more and more. It pulled apart the seniority of two people who were about the same age. Stopping, she frowned and said a little stiffly, "What is it?" She immediately regretted saying it. Why couldn't she change her tone? This disciple is very envious of senior apprentice Ant's alchemy skills. You see, this disciple has been following you for so long. Even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. This disciple also wants to have a taste of alchemy. Senior apprentice Ant, can you let me have a taste as well? Yu Qianqiu pleaded. Is that it? Yan Zixiao's tone was a little disappointed. Yu Qianqiu was really afraid that she wouldn't agree. He asked tentatively, Senior apprentice Ant, is that all right? Yan Zixiao was just about to speak when she suddenly thought that this was an opportunity. She paused for a moment and couldn't help but smile sweetly. Her beautiful smile was like a blooming flower. Yu Qianqiu was stunned and thought to himself, this girl is really hot. If I didn't have to follow Majugu, this scary old lady, I would find a way to have a taste of her. Seeing Yu Qianqiu looking at her as if he was about to drool, Yan Zixiao was overjoyed. If it was someone else looking at her like this she would probably get angry. She had always been proud of her looks, but Yu Qianqiu had made her lose her confidence. She didn't know that Yu Qianqiu was worried about Ma Jiugu. A man like Yu Qianqiu was definitely not a good person. He had absolutely no immunity to beautiful women. As long as he thought it was a beautiful woman he would have the urge to flirt with her. As for whether he would really flirt with her, it was completely based on his own moral bottom line. This was also how he behaved and did things. There was no such thing as good or bad. Whether he should do it or not, it was completely based on his own moral view that could be modified at any time. He could barely be regarded as a capricious gentleman. It couldn't be said that he didn't have morals. It was just that most of the time his instinct was to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. This could be seen from what happened in the mulberry garden. In order to get the spiritual herb seeds he once wanted to flirt with Yan Zixiao, but unfortunately the conditions didn't allow it. When he was bored he wanted to flirt with the beauties in the mulberry garden, but unfortunately the conditions didn't allow it. He also wanted to flirt with the beautiful woman in the mulberry garden Lan Bingxue. But sometimes, people always had to face the reality. In front of absolute strength it was better to honestly hide his thoughts. Although Chu Ping played a major role in kneeling in front of Ma Jiugu, it couldn't be helped. Even if there was a little way he wouldn't kneel. Sometimes, after all, face was not as practical as reality. According to a saying that he learned when he was a soldier in his previous life, flexible strategies and tactics were the magic weapon to defeat the enemy. At least after the incident he comforted himself in this way. He felt that it was a smart move to kneel. Then why did Chu Pinger have a place in his heart for someone like him? Was it because of Chu Pinger's beauty? Oh, it was not. She was beautiful. He could flirt with her as much as he wanted. In his eyes it was not a big deal. The reason was both simple and complicated. In every man's heart, there was a high ground that would be occupied by a woman sooner or later. The more messy a man experienced, the better he would protect this high ground. Sometimes even he didn't know that it was difficult for others to touch it. Chu Ping'er happened to succeed. For this kind of woman men were often crazy. Some men could give up anything for this kind of woman, whether it was money, beautiful women, or power. They could give up all of these things that men loved most. Some people could even give up the throne and the country. In this case, would Yu Qianzhou only love Chu Ping'er for the rest of his life? Or would he never cheat on her and only be loyal to her physically? God knows. You can make your own judgment. But in terms of feelings, I can guarantee it. Xianxia saw that the person she had a crush on was attracted by her appearance, and her confidence returned. Her thoughts also became clear. Don't you want to refine pills by yourself? Okay, I promise you. Yu Qianzhou happily bowed and said, "Thank you, Marshal Antien. Thank you, Marshal Antien. Don't thank me first. I still have something to ask you. It won't be too late to thank me after you answer me to my satisfaction." Xianxia smiled. Her full breast subconsciously puffed out. This was one of the things she was most proud of and also one of the ways she thought she could attract men. But for her to do such a thing to a man, it could be considered unprecedented. Unfortunately, Yu Qianzhou also didn't notice her seductive action. He was muttering in his heart, "If you aren't a family, you won't enter the same house." The saying is true. This grandfather and grandson pair are always the same when they agree to something. There was no helping it. He was the one asking for help, so he had to hold it in even if he had any opinions. He respectfully said, "Marshal Ant, please ask." After Xianxia puffed out her chest, her face turned red. Fortunately, the other party didn't notice. She was vexed and a little disappointed. She took a breath and calmed herself down. She slowly said, "I know you are Ong Kwangsung's Yu Qianzhou. Don't deny it, but don't be in a hurry to deny it. Let me finish first. I don't have any ulterior motives for saying this. I won't tell anyone about your matter. You can rest assured." "Damn it. How can I rest assured when my weakness is in your hands?" Yu Qianzhou's face twitched and said, "If you have anything to say, ask quickly." Since his identity had already been exposed, there was no need to be polite and call him Marshal Ant. Chapter 74. Xianxia didn't know that her words had aroused Yu Qianzhou's disgust. Instead, she was secretly happy that he didn't call her Marshal Uncle. She smiled faintly and said, "It's said that Ong Kwangsung once imprisoned a white fox spirit that had cultivated for 1,000 years. I heard that you wrote these 2 songs for that fox spirit, is that right?" Yu Qianzhou was stunned at first. He didn't expect her to ask this question. Then he frowned. The white fox wasn't only his sister, but he also treated her as his sister from the bottom of his heart. There weren't many people in this world that he really cared about, and the fox spirit that Xianxia mentioned was one of them. Someone kept calling his sister a fox spirit. Although it was a fact, he was quite unhappy in his heart. He had knelt down for the foundation building pill. Seeing that victory wasn't far away, he had to endure this little bit of unhappiness. He suppressed the chill in his heart and forced a smile on his face. He nodded and said, "Marshal Uncle is really amazing. You even know these small things." Not only did he answer Xianxia's question, but he also undoubtedly admitted his identity as Ong Kwangsung. Why did he call her Marshal Uncle again? Xianxia frowned slightly and said, "Don't worry. I won't tell anyone about your past. I believe that you don't have any other purpose in coming to Fuxian Island. I'm just curious why you would write songs for a fox spirit. Can you tell me why?" Yu Qianzhou laughed and said, "It's purely because she helped me a little. I couldn't repay her for the time being, so I wrote 2 songs for her. There's no other reason." "Is that so?" Xianxia rolled her eyes and stared at him. She smiled and said, "Then I asked you to refine pills personally. Is that considered helping you?" Yes. Marshal Uncle helped me. I will repay you in the future." Yu Qianzhou smiled. Xianxia bit her lips again and said with a smile, "I see. I don't need you to repay me. I don't know what that fox spirit helped you for you to write 2 songs for her. I won't ask what it was. If I help you this time, is it worth it for you to compose a song for me?" She then added, "Actually, the song you played a while ago, The Ocean's Roar, was pretty good. Unfortunately, it's not suitable for me and it's not a gift for me. I only need a song that can match one of those 2 songs. First you told me not to worry and now you're giving me a request. Isn't this clearly threatening me? How about I give you a song called 18 Touches? It was guaranteed to spread throughout the world. Once a person had a bad first impression of someone, it was very difficult to change it. It was the same for men towards women, and it was the same for beautiful women. Yu Qianzhou had always been a suspicious person, not to mention that he had been caught red-handed. No matter what the other party said, he would twist it a few times. The more he listened, the more he felt that the other party was threatening him. He could not see any affection in the other party's words, but it was true that he was grinding his teeth in hatred. He secretly gritted his teeth and smiled bitterly. Martial uncle really thinks too highly of me. Since martial uncle doesn't mind my lack of talent and learning, I will definitely compose a song for martial uncle. But a good song can't be composed on a whim. Martial uncle, can you let me owe you for now and let me think about it for a while? Xianxia pondered for a while and thought about it. No matter how talented a person was, it was impossible for him to open his mouth and sing a song that would spread throughout the world. If there was a song like White Fox, singing about me like that vixen, she should really let him think about it. She probably could not imagine that the so-called songs that Yu Qianzhou composed were all plagiarized, but who would know? Then let me think about it. You can give it to me when you're done. Xianxia nodded. Thank you for your tolerance, martial uncle. I will definitely do my best to compose a good song for martial uncle. Yu Qianzhou said so, but in fact he did not intend to do so. He planned to delay it day by day. Once he successfully refined the foundation building pill and built his foundation, he would simply find a song to pass the time. There's one more thing. Xianxia looked at Yu Qianzhou and a trace of shyness suddenly flashed in her eyes. She said softly, in the future when it's just the two of us, you're not allowed to call me martial uncle. When there are outsiders, do as you please. No matter how gentle she was, no matter how beautiful she was. Unfortunately, in a certain person's eyes, gentleness and beauty could not be seen. She had already become a pink skeleton that needed to be constantly guarded against. Yu Qianzhou asked doubtfully, not calling you martial uncle? Then what should I call you? Xianxia said shyly, just call me Zixia. That's not good, right? Yu Qianzhou glanced at her suspiciously. If I say it's okay, then it's okay. Anyway, when there's no one else, you're not allowed to call me martial uncle. You can only call me by my name. Xianxia was annoyed that this idiot was a little unromantic. She stomped her feet and simply said, I'll call you Qianzhou from now on. If you don't agree, then I won't agree to your alchemy. Her words were so obvious. No matter how stupid Yu Qianzhou was, he could still see some clues. Could it be that this girl has fallen for me? Thinking that it was possible, he laughed and said, Zixia? As long as martial uncle likes it, then in the future when there's no one around, I'll call you martial uncle Zixia. Hearing that he was finally willing to call her Zixia, Xianxia immediately blushed. He had never thought about pursuing a man. But sometimes feelings were just so strange. For some reason she just had to fall for this ordinary-looking man. She turned her blushing face and said, Qianzhou, let's go. After saying that, she walked away on her own as if she was running away. Qianzhou? Yu Qianzhou was startled. He felt a toothache when he heard that. He reckoned that this matter was not far from what he had guessed. This girl might really have fallen for him. But after thinking about it, he felt that it was unreasonable. This stinky body was not qualified to be a handsome man, and his cultivation was not high. Could it be that she was conquered by his personal charm? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. It was fine if there was a bubbly beautiful Chu Pinger, but there was also a bubbly beautiful Xianxia. It was really time to examine his own charm. The only thing he didn't expect was that these two beauties were bewitched by the songs that he had plagiarized. They both thought that he was a gifted man. In addition to beauties who loved heroes, there were also many beauties who loved gifted men. In order to prove his guess, Yu Qianzhou shouted, Zixia, walk slowly. Wait for me. The beautiful woman who was walking quickly in front of him heard his shout. Her shoulders trembled and she really slowed down. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and followed her. He glanced sideways at the beauty unscrupulously and called out with a smile, Zixia. Yes. Xianxia replied softly with a blushing face. Yu Qianzhou was happy in his heart. However, one must always be on guard against others. He thought of a guess that he already had and said with a smile, Zixia, actually I saw you before I joined supporting Immortal Island. Xianxia raised her head and looked at him in surprise. Really? Then she wanted to say, Then why don't I have any impression of you? Although she didn't say it out loud, Yu Qianqiu could guess it. He didn't mind it and said with a smile, "That day when I was in Hundred Flowers Valley and was about to join supporting Immortal Island with the supporting Immortal token, I saw Elder Qin sending you out. There was also a young man accompanying you. I seem to have heard the shopkeeper address the young man and you as young palace master and young lady." "You were there too? How is that possible? Then why didn't I see him?" Yan Zixiao blushed again. She thought to herself, "What's wrong with me today? I thought I saw an outsider in the shop but I didn't even look at him. Since he could say it so clearly, it must be him." She didn't expect that the person she didn't even look at that day would be chasing after her today. "Hey, you are a noble person with short memories. I am just an insignificant person. Why would you look at me?" Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. "Of course not. I was busy at that time and didn't pay attention." Yan Zixiao explained. I understand. Yu Qianqiu smiled craftily. However, that shopkeeper addressed the young man as young palace master and called you young lady. I am very curious about your identity. You even know my hidden identity. I wonder if I can know yours?" Yan Zixiao was silent for a while and bit her lips. "The young man you are talking about is my older brother. Hundred Flowers Palace Master is my mother. That day I went to the shop to find Elder Qin to discuss my joining supporting Immortal Island." Chapter 75. "Ah!" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed. He had heard from Guan Yu that the palace mistress of Hundred Flowers Palace was the daughter of the previous sect master of Fuxian Island. During this time he also learned that the current sect master was the disciple of the previous sect master, Guan Weiwu was the son of the previous sect master, and Ma Jiugu was the aunt of the previous sect master. No wonder Yan Zixiao called Ma Jiugu great-grandmother. Her seniority was really high. "You were doing well in the Hundred Flowers Valley. Why did you come to Fuxian Island?" Yan Zixiao shook her head and said, "I don't know the specifics. My father and mother discussed it. My brother went to 10,000 demons to learn spells and I came to Fuxian Island to learn alchemy." Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully. It was said that the previous sect master of supporting Immortal Island had no choice but to step down because of his daughter's matter. In reality, he had passed the position to his disciple Feng Xiangtian. Yan Zixiao's identity didn't seem to be known by many in supporting Immortal Island. If everyone knew that she was from the Flower Palace, it would probably be impossible for her to join supporting Immortal Island. It was no wonder that Yan Zixiao was so low-key in supporting Immortal Island. It was estimated that her brother's situation in 10,000 demons was similar. A son and a daughter joined the number 1 sect of the Devil Dao and the number 1 sect of the Righteous Dao respectively. This was a little interesting. The two of them came to the bottom of the cliff by the sea. Just as Yu Qianqiu rolled up his sleeves and was about to climb up, Yan Zixiao lifted him up. This made his pride as a man suffer a great blow. He secretly vowed to succeed in building his foundation as soon as possible. The temperature of the alchemy chamber in the belly of the mountain was scorching. Although Yu Qianqiu still struggled to carry it, he gradually became able to bear it after coming here a few times. It was just that his vital qi was greatly consumed. However, with a large number of spirit stones he could recover it very quickly. Yan Zixiao did not go back on her words. Yu Qianqiu achieved his wish of refining the alchemy personally. The former took out a large amount of common spirit herbs that her great-grandmother had prepared for her from her storage pouch for the latter to use to her heart's content. After personally doing it, Yu Qianqiu discovered that there was a huge difference between what he had learned and what he had learned in theory. Putting aside the fact that he was not proficient in the technique, it was very painful for him to use his divine sense to observe and control the concoction of pills in the scorching hot furnace. This was the first time Yu Qianqiu's divine sense had just entered the blazing furnace when he let out a loud cry. He quickly retracted his divine sense. His entire body's skin had turned bright red as if it had been scalded by fire. As a result, his divine sense had been damaged and his entire body was dispirited. It gave Yan Zixiao a fright. Only then did she remember that her great-grandmother had said that those who had not reached the foundation building stage or above were not suitable to learn alchemy. Yu Qianqiu took out a piece of upper-grade spirit stone and absorbed all the spiritual qi within it. Only then did his damaged divine sense recover. Xianxia's heart ached for him. She told him what his great-grandmother had said and advised him not to try anymore. Yu Qianqiu stubbornly shook his head and said, "Didn't your great-grandmother say that? Although the qi refining stage is not suitable for alchemy, as long as you train your divine sense to be strong enough, you can also concoct pills. Since others can do it, I believe I can also do it." In the midst of his miserable cries, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense stayed in the furnace for a longer and longer time. Seeing him being so cruel and torturing himself, Xianxia's heart ached, but she could not persuade him. She could only accompany him by the side and shed tears. Time passed day by day. The time his divine sense stayed in the furnace was not enough to control the time needed to concoct a furnace of pills. In the midst of his discouragement, he was pleasantly surprised to find that his divine sense could actually extend to a place dozens of meters away. He could observe all the movements within a radius of dozens of meters. Furthermore, his control over his divine sense was becoming more and more smooth. He could not fulfill the promise of concocting pills in 3 days. Yu Qianqiu returned to the Golden Pearl and solemnly apologized to Guan Yu and Chen Feng. After repeatedly assuring him, he finally obtained their forgiveness. Subsequently, he stayed in the secret alchemy room for a long time. Xianxia also asked for leave from her great-grandmother and accompanied him by his side. His divine sense was injured again and again, and he also took out pieces of high-grade spirit stones to treat his injuries. When Xianxia shifted her attention from him to the high-grade spirit stones in his hands for the first time, she could not help but be shocked. If she remembered correctly, the number of spirit stones that Yu Qianqiu used to treat his injuries in the past month was probably more than 1,000. Heavens! More than 1,000 high-grade spirit stones, how was this possible? How could a qi refining stage disciple have so many spirit stones? Even if she was the biological daughter of the palace master of Hundred Flowers Palace, it would be difficult for her to take out so many spirit stones so casually. That was equivalent to 10 million low-grade spirit stones. She grew up in the Hundred Flowers Valley, so she knew the market prices of many items. Naturally, she understood how many things this number could buy in the cultivation world. Later, when she saw that he was still able to take out pieces of high-grade spirit stones, Xianxia was already used to it. She was just curious as to where he got so many spirit stones from. However, this was a bit too extravagant. Although the spiritual energy contained in high-grade spirit stones could heal damaged divine sense very quickly, a piece of high-grade spirit stone was enough to buy nearly 50 divine sense repairing pills. When Yu Qianqiu was delighted to find that his divine sense could extend to a radius of nearly 100 meters, the two of them had unknowingly stayed in the cave for a full 3 months. During this period, only Xianxia occasionally went out to get food and water, but Yu Qianqiu did not take a single step out. When she saw that he was sweating profusely, Xianxia would fetch cold water, wet a handkerchief and carefully wipe him. When she saw that he was tired and did not want to move, she would send food to his mouth. As for Yu Qianqiu, since he knew that Xianxia liked him, he enjoyed it with peace of mind, as if taking care of him was what he should do. From the beginning, when his divine sense was injured, to a muffled groan to a slight frown, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense could already stay in the pill furnace for a day. Although Xianxia had not experienced the pain of divine sense being injured, she had heard people say that it was much more painful than physical injuries. She could not figure out why he was doing this, and when she could not bear to see it, she advised him to stop more than once. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would say with a slight smile, "How can you see the rainbow without experiencing the wind and rain? If you want to do something, how can you not suffer a little? Not everything can be achieved easily. Men, sometimes, not only do you have to be ruthless to others, if you want to succeed, you have to be even more ruthless to yourself." Although he said it very easily, Xianxia's heart trembled and she looked at him with a complicated expression. In the future, she did not advise him again, and only did what she thought she should do, taking care of him with all her heart. If this matter was seen by people who knew her identity, they would probably be dumbfounded. The dignified Hundred Flower Palace's young miss actually did this kind of thing to serve others. However, Yu Qianqiu did not think so. He only knew that people would pay attention to their status when they got married, and they would pay attention to the fact that their families were well matched. What did dating have to do with status? The ordinary spiritual herbs used in 3 months could be counted as piles. Fortunately, supporting Immortal Island had a lot of such spiritual herbs, so no one would care about it. Unfortunately, the success rate of his alchemy was still very low. He could barely make one furnace out of 20, and at most 10 pills in one furnace. They were all ordinary pills used in the cultivation world to treat external injuries. According to his success rate, even if he went out to refine pills for people for free, he was afraid that people would be scared away. The price of refining a furnace of pills was too high. However, Xianxia felt that it was almost enough. He estimated that 100 sets of spiritual herbs could at least make 3 or 4 furnaces. Moreover, with enough spiritual herbs as a backing, it was time to refine foundation-building pills. He decided to rest for a day and adjust his mental state to its peak before he started refining. Chapter 76. On the way back along the river, Xianxia glanced at the curvaceous figure beside him. He couldn't help but feel lustful and gradually moved closer to her. During the time in the cave, he had touched Xianxia many times, but he only took advantage of her. For example, he touched her buttocks, sneakily attacked her breasts, and so on. It was lonely in the cave. Under the circumstance that Xianxia couldn't resist strongly, Boss Yu naturally enjoyed these little tricks, which made Xianxia feel ashamed and resentful. She didn't expect him to be so bold, but she couldn't do anything about it. Fortunately, Xianxia's mind was focused on learning to refine elixirs, so he didn't do anything more excessive. After being cooped up in the cave for 3 months, their relationship had improved by leaps and bounds. It was not easy for them to come out and relax. Naturally, a certain someone's lust was aroused. Just as he was considering whether to eat Xianxia right now, a demonic claw quietly lifted up and was about to pat her perky buttocks. What? Xianxia suddenly looked up to the sky. Xianxia forgot to do anything and also looked up. There were 2 people flying in the direction of Pinglai Pavilion on their swords. Xianxia turned her head and asked, "Qiano, do you see the 2 people on the sword? Judging from their clothes, they seem to be Ong Kuangsung's disciples. What are they doing here?" They didn't fly fast on their swords. Obviously, Fuxian Island was their destination. Xianxia was very familiar with Ong Kuangsung's clothes, so he recognized the 2 people at a glance. They were Ong Kuangsung's disciples. He retracted his demonic claw inadvertently and frowned. He shook his head and said, "I don't know, but it shouldn't be for me." After this incident, he lost the interest to do evil. When the 2 returned to the mulberry garden and were about to separate, Xianxia urged, "Xixia, if possible, can you help me ask Ong Kuangsung's disciples why they are here?" Xianxia nodded lightly and called out to him, who was about to turn and leave. She said shyly, "Qianxia, when will you move into the inner garden? I'll help you tell Auntie Lan." "Why do you want to live in the inner garden?" Xianxia was taken aback. He pointed at Furong, who was busy in the garden, and said, "No need to trouble yourself. I am already used to living together with Martial Aunt Furong. So, see you tomorrow." As he said that, he turned around and walked towards the spiritual herb field and shouted with a grin, "Martial Uncle Furong, do you need help?" Xianxia stared blankly at Xianxia, who was rushing to do the work. She stood there for a while and murmured, "Have you gotten used to living with her?" She sighed faintly and returned to the inner garden. Right after she left, Lan Bingxue walked out from the gate of the inner garden slowly. She looked at Xianxia, who had disappeared into the inner garden, then at the man and the woman in the spiritual herbs field, and frowned. Furong couldn't dissuade Xianxia, so she had to give the thing in her hand to Xianxia. Looking at the man who was bowing and busy in front of her, she thought that she hadn't seen him for 3 months. It was so good to see him again. He should be her only friend in the mulberry garden. The expression on her disfigured face changed. From the half of her face, it could be seen that she smiled, although the smile was a bit scary. After they finished their work, you carried the pole and I carried the ladle, and they went back to their own nest. Xianxia disappeared from his bed without any hesitation. Furong just glanced at him. She was curious about Xianxia's behavior, but she was already used to it. As soon as Xianxia went back to the golden bead, he was shocked. Guanyu was feeding a red pony. Where did this pony come from? Was there another passage in the golden bead that led to the outside? This was his nest to protect his life. Guanyu also noticed him. He waved at him and said with a smile, "Boss, come and see my red rabbit." Xianxia walked over with a calm face and asked, "Where did you get this pony?" Guan Yu laughed and said, I really didn't expect it. Boss, do you remember the 2 horses that we sent to the 100 Flowers Valley last time? Hee, it turned out to be a male and a female. This little fellow was born from them. Yu Qianzhou let out a sigh of relief. So it was like this. The pony was very cute. Its red fur was glossy and smooth. Its beautiful big eyes blinked. Seeing a stranger coming, it wasn't afraid. It turned its head to look at them, neighed, and swung its ponytail twice as if it was greeting them. Yu Qianzhou said with a smile, It's really beautiful. Yinchang, is it male or female? Of course it's male. Guan Yu said proudly. Yu Qianzhou walked over and touched its smooth fur. He said, It's still a handsome guy. Suddenly he saw the radish in Guan Yu's hand that he was feeding the pony. He was startled and asked doubtfully, Yunchang, did you sell radish seeds when you went to the 100 Flowers Valley last time? Radish? Guan Yu was stunned. He looked at the thing in his hand and said with disdain, This is a radish? Boss, don't tell me you can't even recognize ginseng. How can I feed radish to the future red rabbit horse? Only you can think of that. Ginseng? Yu Qianzhou touched his nose and said with a smile, This ginseng that hasn't been dried looks like a radish. Needless to say, this ginseng was definitely grown from the seeds that he brought. However, using ginseng to feed a horse was indeed a little too extravagant. Red Rabbit, come here. Someone called out softly. The 2 of them turned their heads and saw the white fox holding a bunch of lush green grass in its hand, calling out to it. The little red rabbit sneezed and turned its head to look. It let out a happy cry and turned its small body around. It raised its 4 shiny black hooves and ran. This little fellow still knew how to be protective of the fairer sex. It knew that fresh flowers shouldn't be stepped on, so it turned a corner and ran through the field. Guan Yu held the half of the ginseng and complained, Heartless fellow. Yu Qianzhou chuckled at the side. Just as he was about to get down to business, Qin Feng's angry voice came from the forest. He roared, Guan Yu, you bastard, you stole my ginseng to feed the horse again. What happened? Yu Qianzhou asked. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly, nothing much. That Qin Feng brat is too stingy. Pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the red rabbit already makes my heart ache. Yu Qianzhou let out an oh sound and didn't mind. With the existence of the purple chaos, pulling out 2 ginseng to feed the horse was indeed nothing. Moreover, that little fellow was too cute. It deserved to eat something good to nourish itself. If he had known earlier, he would have given the task of planting ginseng to Guan Yu. However, Qin Feng's attitude was completely different from the other 2. He ran over and rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was going to fight to the death with Guan Yu. Guan Yu couldn't be compared to Yu Qianzhou and the white fox. Qin Feng's current cultivation level was the same as his, so if they were to fight, it was hard to say who would have the upper hand. However, as the boss, Yu Qianzhou naturally couldn't watch his 2 little brothers fight in front of him. He separated them in the middle and shouted, Qin Feng, what are you doing? We are all brothers. Do you need to fight to pull out 2 ginseng? 2 ginseng. Qin Feng pointed at Guan Yu and said angrily, If it was just 2 normal ginseng, I wouldn't have said anything. But the ginseng that this bastard pulled out were all 100-year-old ginseng that I had painstakingly planted. Those were all prepared for concocting the foundation-building pill. For that stupid horse, he stole close to 100-year-old ginseng from me in the past 2 months. This is intolerable. Stole close to 100-year-old ginseng to feed to the horse? The muscles on Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. 2 black lines appeared on his forehead. He stared angrily at Guan Yu. No one can ruin my grand plan of building my foundation. Guan Yu smiled awkwardly and said, Let me explain. Didn't you see that after my scarlet rabbit ate the 100-year-old ginseng, its fur became bright and full of spiritual energy? Thought my ass. Qin Feng, beat this bastard to death for me. Yu Qianzhou said while gnashing his teeth. 2 figures pounced at Guan Yu. Under the rather angry punches and kicks, the latter let out a blood-curdling scream. Chapter 77. Yu Qianzhou was fighting to his heart's content when he suddenly sensed something charging over. He didn't hurry to turn around and instead turned around to sweep his leg. With a ping sound, the colt was sent flying. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. The foal struggled to get up from the ground and charged at Qin Feng, who was punching and kicking. Stupid horse, you ate my ginseng and still dare to help the evildoer. *CK. Yu Qianchou kicked the horse again and helped Qin Feng out. Stop! The white fox shouted and her figure appeared in front of them. With the white fox speaking, Yu Qianchou and Qin Feng didn't dare to make a move. The two of them cursed and stood to the side. The white fox told them to stop but didn't tell them to stop. Instead, the foal got up and ran to Guan Yu, who was sitting on the ground with his hands on his head. It bit on his green robe and gently pulled. Hey, this stupid horse can really take a beating. A normal adult horse wouldn't be able to take 2 kicks from me. Looks like I didn't eat ginseng for nothing. Hey, it's a little intelligent now. It knows how to protect its owner at such a young age. Yu Qianchou said to Qin Feng. Qin Feng replied with yes and yes. The white fox then rolled her eyes at them. The two of them chuckled and shut up. Seeing that the white fox had arrived, the badly battered Guan Yu finally felt relieved and stood up. He stroked the 3 strands of his long beard that had been messed up and patted the footprints on his green robe. He looked at the 2 assailants resentfully and knew that he was in the wrong first. Without saying anything else, he muttered, "Boss, it's fine if you hit me, but why didn't you let go of such a small horse?" Heh. This man and horse were really interesting. Yu Qianchou laughed and scolded, "Damn, is your horse more important or us Foundation establishment? You're crazy. I don't want to waste time with you. You two prepare 100 sets of spirit herbs for the Foundation establishment pill. Your boss will start concocting pills tomorrow." Really? Qin Feng said happily. Guan Yu had also forgotten about being beaten up just now. He opened his eyes wide in excitement. Yes. I've finally found a suitable place to concoct pills. I can start now, said Yu Qianchou with a smile. He wasn't going to tell her that the previous 3-day appointment was because his skills weren't up to par. He made up a lie and said that he hadn't found a good place to concoct pills. As for the fact that he had suffered so much to learn alchemy, he was even less likely to mention it. If he did, it would really damage the prestige of his boss. Both of them nodded and went to prepare the spiritual herbs without saying anything else. The colt limped along with Guan Yu, who had just been beaten. Yu Qianchou gritted his teeth at the sight of it and scolded jokingly, "Lousy horse." The white fox's slender and fair neck gently twisted as she looked at him and said, "As far as I know, it's not easy for aura condensation cultivators to concoct panaceas. Have you really learned it? Look at what Big Sister is saying. Don't you know whose little brother I am? How could such a small matter stump me? Of course I've really learned it," Yu Qianchou said proudly. The white fox turned around and looked at the sea of flowers. She said lightly, "The fire in the cauldron is very strong. Your cultivation is only at the late stage of aura condensation. In order to learn alchemy, your divine sense must have suffered a lot. There are quite a lot of high-grade spirit stones in that pile of spirit stones. With her cultivation level, she naturally wouldn't be able to hide the fact that something was missing in this area. Only a few people knew the pain of having their divine sense injured. Even though they had endured it, Yu Qianchou still felt a lingering fear when he thought about it. He smiled unnaturally and looked at the sea of flowers. He changed the topic and said, "Big Sister, look at the beautiful flowers in this golden pearl. The scenery is really good. Keep calling it golden pearl, golden pearl. It's really a bit hard to pronounce. Big Sister, why don't you give this place a name?" The white fox shook her head lightly. A strand of hair hanging down her forehead was tucked behind her ear. She said slowly, "I can't. Little brother is brimming with talent. You should name it." "I'm brimming with talent?" Yu Qianchou knew his own limitations. However, the feeling of being praised by a beauty was really good. His mood also became better. He opened his arms facing the sea of flowers. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the fragrance. He exhaled and opened his eyes. In the far west, there is a legendary ideal world called Utopia. I hope that one day Golden Pearl can also become a legend and become an ideal world. Big Sister, how about Utopia? Utopia. The white fox carefully thought about it. She frowned unconsciously. To be honest, she didn't think that there was anything nice about this name. In fact, it was a bit strange. However, she still nodded. She looked at the sea of flowers that was brimming with fragrance. She smiled and said, "Ideal world? I hope that I can live peacefully like this. This is my ideal world. Let's call it Utopia, according to little brother." Yu Qianchou smiled. He suddenly tilted his head and asked, "Big sister, do you have a name?" The white fox looked at him in surprise. When she turned back, her eyes were filled with confusion. A scene that had been buried for a long time came to her mind again. The scholar clumsily used a knife to cut a thorn hairpin. He made a few cuts on his hand. The faint red on the thorn hairpin was his blood. He used his sleeve to wipe it, but the red seemed to never be wiped off. The scholar happily held the thorn hairpin and ran over. He smiled and said, "Little Bai, look. I made this for you. Come, let me put it in for you." In fact, she saw the whole process of his clumsiness. She nodded her head shyly. She tied up her hair and let him put the thorn hairpin in her hair. The scholar looked at it carefully and smiled. "Little Bai, you look really good. Little Bai, let me give you a name." She looked at him happily and nodded her head. The scholar looked at the hairpin and thought for a while. He said, "Since you are called Little Bai, I will name you White Jingyang. What do you think? Do you like it?" She nodded her head and said, "I like it." The scholar smiled with satisfaction. It had been more than 200 years. The scholar was long gone. The hairpin was lost in the fierce battle in the capital city. Could not be found anymore. Perhaps it really was just a dream of lovers and butterflies. Since it was a dream, there would come a day when they would wake up. Should I wake up? Maybe I have already woken up? White Fox opened his mouth and let out a breath. A different expression flashed in his eyes. He looked at Xianxia, who was waiting for his answer. He shook his head and sighed, "Perhaps. It has been a long time. I forgot and can't remember." Xianxia was stunned. It was a troublesome thing for people to live for so long. She even forgot her own name. He touched his nose and smiled. "Anyway, I have given Jinju a name today. Big sister, why don't I give you a name too?" The white fox agreed with a soft "n" sound. She had a heavy responsibility. She must give her a name worthy of her beauty. Xianxia walked around with his hands behind his back. Her surname was Bai, but what should she be called? The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't figure it out. After a long time he scratched his head, but he still couldn't figure it out. Could she be called Bai Meili or Bai Pretty Beauty? If she came up with this name, he could really be called an idiot. Xianxia painfully shook his head. He looked at the sea of flowers swaying in the wind. He wondered if Bai Xianhua would like it or not. After a moment of silence, he looked at the peerless beauty standing there with shame. He sighed. An idea flashed in his mind. A person from the myths and legends from his previous life appeared in front of him. She was also a beautiful and infatuated demon who had cultivated for 1,000 years. But she was a snake demon. Xianxia painfully groaned. Didn't they say that he was talented? Could it be that his talent could only be plagiarized? Depressing. Big sister, I thought of a name. I don't know if you like it. Bai Suzhen. What do you think? If it doesn't work, let me think again. Xianxia added. Su as in simple, Zhen as in loyal. Bai Suzhen. Bai Suzhen. The white fox frowned. After pondering for a while, she turned around and floated away. It seemed that she didn't like it. Xianxia felt bored. After thinking about it, he came to a sudden realization. He really wanted to slap himself twice. He really had nothing better to do. Why did he have to mention loyalty? She had finally forgotten about her past with great difficulty. Wasn't he intentionally reminding her? Thank you, little brother. I will be called Bai Suzhen from now on. The white fox's voice floated over with the fragrance of flowers. Xianxia was stunned. Chapter 78. Not long after, Guan Yu and Qin Feng each came back with a bag of spiritual herbs. Xianxia took them and weighed them in his hand before asking, "Is 100 enough?" "Yes. It's quite a lot." Xianxia directly poured the spiritual herbs into the storage bag and threw the 2 bags back to the 2. He smiled and said, "Continue to plant the spiritual herbs. Just wait for my good news." The 2 were so excited that they wanted to say some flattering words, but he had already disappeared. When he returned to the small house in the mulberry garden, the sky was not dark yet. Xianxia immediately fell asleep. He had to prepare for the next day. He slept until the sky was still dark. When he heard the sound of Hibiscus getting up, he knew that she was going to work. He also woke up to help. Hibiscus couldn't refuse his kindness. The two were like before, one carrying a pole and the other carrying a ladle. They swayed out of the mulberry garden. They didn't know that Elder Lawn was staring at them with a frosty face not far away in the night. The two were busy until the sky was slightly bright. Xianxia stood guard at the entrance of the inner garden of the mulberry garden. When there were people coming out of the garden in twos and threes, Xianxia also came out. The two tacitly left the mulberry garden and walked in the direction of the river. Hibiscus, who was busy in the garden, looked at their figures. She bit her lips and subconsciously raised her hand to touch the half of her face that was already disfigured. After the two walked along the river for a long distance, Xianxia turned his head and looked around. When he saw that there was no one, he chuckled and said, "Zixia, did you find out about Ong Kwang-tsung?" "Yes." Xianxia nodded and said, "I asked Aunt Lon. Ong Kwang-tsung's disciple coming here has nothing to do with you. He's here to send an invitation to Fuxian Island to participate in the exorcism conference." "Exorcism conference? What does it do? Why haven't I heard of it?" Xianxia asked. Aunt Lon said that it's a conference led by Ong Kwang-tsung. It seems that they're preparing to set up an organization that specializes in eradicating the demonic path. "Aunt Lon didn't tell me the details," Zixia said. "Ong Kwang-tsung will take the lead? Hey, this Ong Kwang-tsung is really jumping higher and higher. Since when did they have the right to lead the cultivation world?" Xianxia shook his head and laughed. Zixia admitted, "Ong Kwang-tsung has been very domineering in recent years. Last year he even caused trouble in our 100 Flowers Valley." "What happened?" Xianxia asked curiously. "As far as I know, although your 100 Flowers Valley is neither righteous nor demonic, it's not considered demonic either. What's Ong Kwang-tsung doing in the 100 Flowers Valley?" Zixia frowned and said, "Sect leader Ong Kwang-tsung's grandson Lu Jingguang was staying in our inn in the 100 Flowers Valley. He was ambushed and injured, so he came to us to ask for an explanation." When she said the last part, her face turned slightly red. When Zixia said this, he knew what was going on. Last year in the 100 Flowers Valley, the person who ambushed Lu Jingguang was none other than him. That guy was castrated by him, but it was really hard to say this out loud. Xianxia smiled and said, "I'm afraid your 100 Flowers Valley is not that easy to bully. Of course, our 100 Flowers Valley just sent out a few elders and explained the reason." "Didn't Ong Kwang-tsung obediently retreat?" Zixia said with a proud expression on her face. The two of them chatted and laughed as they went to the secret alchemy room in the cave. As usual, Zixia took out a small pile of ordinary spiritual herbs from her storage pouch. Xianxia scratched his head and said with a smile, "I'm afraid I won't be able to use these things today." Zixia felt strange and said, "You're not practicing today?" Xianxia embarrassedly took out a few spiritual herbs from his storage pouch and threw them on the ground. Zixia had also stayed in the mulberry garden for a long time, so she was not unfamiliar with these spiritual herbs. She couldn't help but be surprised and said, "Heart-guarding orchid, diamond fruit, gold mixed grass. These are spiritual herbs for refining foundation building pill." "Yes, I'm going to refine foundation building pill today." Xianxia stared at her eyes and said to see her reaction. Zixia frowned and said, "Where did these spiritual herbs come from? Did you steal them from the garden?" "Steal them?" Xianxia said gloomily. "Do you think I'm that kind of person? What's more, even if I wanted to steal them, the spiritual herbs in the garden are not mature yet. Otherwise I wouldn't have to wait for 3 years." "Then where did they come from?" Zixia asked. Xianxia saw her asking so many questions as if she didn't believe him. He was slightly unhappy, waved his hand and said, "In any case, I didn't steal them. I'll explain it to you later. Right now the most important thing is to refine the foundation building pill. I really need it." Zixia also heard the unhappy tone in his words. Biting her lips, she put the spiritual herbs she just threw on the ground back into her storage pouch. The mechanism under the alchemy furnace was opened, and the surging earth fire immediately burned under the alchemy furnace. The secret room immediately became bright red and the temperature rose in a flash. Xianxia got rid of distracting thoughts, adjusted his mood, adjusted the true qi in his body, and quietly waited for the alchemy furnace to preheat. Today's alchemy was not the same as usual. In the past, Zixia brought a lot of spiritual herbs, but they were all the same common spiritual herbs, and the pills refined were also some common superficial wounds. Today's alchemy was the foundation-building pill. Not only were the spiritual herbs precious, but it was also refined with 9 different spiritual herbs. It was not like refining a single one like before, and it also had a high requirement for the control of the divine sense. Last night, Xianxia had memorized the refining method and steps in the jade butterfly pill recipe. He recited it fluently in his heart, and without any mistakes he couldn't help but feel a little excited. The alchemy furnace was almost preheated. Standing on the side, his face hurt. Xianxia quickly put the 9 spiritual herbs into the alchemy furnace. Circulating his true qi, he hit the lid of the furnace with his palm, and the lid closed with a ping sound. Not daring to hesitate, his divine sense quickly entered the alchemy furnace, and controlled the steaming hot air, quickly separating the 9 spiritual herbs. Not long after, the spiritual herbs in the 9 directions were all refined into a paste, and the 9 balls of air swirled in the air. After stabilizing, his divine sense rushed to the dirt-dispelling grass paste in the middle, and with great difficulty, it was divided into 8 parts, and slowly drifted in the 8 directions of the spiritual herbs. Suddenly, the 8 big and 8 small balls of paste in the furnace shook. Xianxia secretly shouted, "Not good." Controlling 16 balls with his divine sense at once was a little difficult. When the dirt-dispelling grass was separated further and further, his divine sense finally couldn't control it, and the 16 balls of paste fell together on the red-hot bottom of the furnace, instantly turning into flying ash. It's over. The spiritual herbs for a foundation-building pill were all gone. Xianxia retracted his divine sense and regretfully opened his eyes. High in the air, he hit the lid of the furnace with his palm. The lid bounced up and a ball of black ash sprayed out from the furnace. His nose and mouth could smell a burnt smell. Xianxia, who had been watching from the side, naturally knew that he had failed. She felt a little sad for him and comforted him. "Qianhu, it's okay. After all, very few people can succeed on their first try." Xianxia shook his head with a bitter smile. Spirit Dawn of the foundation building pills level were different from other low-level Spirit Dawn. They absolutely couldn't contain any impurities, or else it would definitely affect the efficacy of the Spirit Dawn. Foundation building was not easy, and if a foundation building pill with mediocre efficacy was added, then it would really make people cry. The effect of the dirt-dispelling grass was to remove the impurities in the Spirit Dawn, and the step of fusing it with other spiritual herbs was not something that could be avoided. Chapter 79. You don't need to comfort me, it's okay. Xianxia walked to the side, took out a middle-grade spirit stone, sat down cross-legged, and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to repair his slightly damaged divine sense and true qi. Xianxia silently stood on the side, no longer saying anything. She put herself in his shoes. If she had not built her foundation and finally got a set of spirit herbs to refine a foundation-building pill, but then failed, one could imagine how she would feel. After restoring his body to its best state, Xianxia stood up and stretched his arms and chest, relaxing his muscles and bones. Under Xianxia's attentive gaze, he took out another set of spirit herbs from his storage pouch. "He has more?" Xianxia was slightly stunned and immediately shouted, "Wait." Xianxia turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Xianxia explained, "I don't mean anything else. Leave your set of spirit herbs first. I'll go ask great-grandma, let her help you refine it. I think with her help the success rate must be higher." Xianxia waved his hand. No, I think it's better not to let her know about this. Failure is the mother of success. Failure is a habit. Isn't it just a set of spirit herbs? It's okay." In his heart he thought, "Damn, if it wasn't because I really can't find a place to refine pills, I don't even want to tell you. If that old granny knows I have spirit herbs so soon, who knows what the consequences will be." Xianxia didn't think so. The scene of Xianxia kneeling for the spirit herb seed was still vivid in her mind. It showed how important this spirit herb was to him. She wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't say anything. The furnace was hot. Xianxia threw the spirit herbs in, waved his hand to cover the furnace, and used his divine sense to control the spirit herbs to separate and refine. When the dirt-dispelling grass paste was separated, he concentrated and was extremely careful. Unfortunately, his divine sense wasn't strong enough and he failed again. If it wasn't for the pill recipe requiring the 8 spirit herbs to be refined at the same time, Xianxia really wanted to fuse them one by one. Biting her lips, Xianxia silently watched as Xianxia cleaned the ashes from the furnace and retrieved spiritual stones to recover his divine sense and true qi. She couldn't help but blame him for not listening to her advice. When Xianxia took out the 3rd set of spiritual grass, Xianxia's lips parted slightly in surprise. This was only possible for a great sect like the supporting Immortal Island. If it was any other sect, it would not be easy to gather 3 sets of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill. One must know that a set of spirit herbs to refine the foundation establishment pill could be sold for a lot of spirit stones in the cultivation world. If the conditions weren't right, one could imagine the consequences of trying to forcefully concoct the pellet. After failing again and again, Xianxia was starting to get a headache. He had already destroyed 10 sets of spiritual herbs, but he couldn't even fuse the dirt-dispelling grass. Although he still had 90 sets of spiritual herbs to back him up, he still couldn't make it. He clenched his teeth and tried 2 more sets of spiritual herbs. Every time he almost failed. Thinking about the process of concoction, he realized that there was a problem with his mental state. He was impatient, nervous, excited, and his mental state was very unstable. His divine sense was originally not strong enough. Coupled with these factors that affected his control over his divine sense, he was afraid that this was the reason why he failed. Since he found the source of the problem, he would naturally have a solution. At least that was what he thought. He took out the spirit stones and slowly absorbed the spiritual energy into his body. Then he slowly recovered his true qi and divine sense. After recovering, he was not in a hurry to concoct the pellet. Instead, he relaxed his mental state and entered a state of emptiness. Xianxia had been paying attention to him. She didn't know why he needed such a long time to recover this time. After sitting cross-legged for a long time, Xianxia slowly let out a breath. He stood up and quietly walked to the front of the furnace. There was no expression on his face. He casually took out a set of spiritual herbs from his storage bag and threw them into the furnace. Then he closed the furnace lid. With the assistance of the previous dozen times, his movements were very smooth. His divine sense controlled the spiritual herbs and refined them. The paste of the dirt-dispelling grass was once again divided into 8 parts. However, he was not in a hurry to fuse them. He carefully felt the 16 balls of paste. After confirming that there was no problem with his mental state, he calmly controlled the 8 drops of paste to the other 8 balls of spiritual herbs. His divine sense was not strong enough to drive things. He could only stir the airflow in the furnace to drive it. This was the difference between reaching the foundation building stage and not reaching the foundation building stage. However, it also consumed more energy and true qi. With a calm mental state, there was really an effect. The 8 drops of dirt-dispelling grass were smoothly integrated into the 8 spiritual herbs. The 8 balls of chaos were also a lot bigger. Xianxia couldn't help but become excited. His mood fluctuated. The 8 spiritual herbs floating in the furnace also swayed. Xianxia was shocked. He immediately calmed down. The 16 balls became 8. It was much easier for his divine sense to control them. The next step was to remove the impurities in the spiritual herbs. After the 8 balls of paste were injected with the dirt-dispelling grass, they changed. The original paste gradually became clear. His divine sense controlled the airflow produced by the high temperature and spun the 8 spiritual herbs. As the spinning speed became faster and faster, impurities were thrown out. Seeing that the 8 balls of paste were about to turn into clear liquids of different colors, Xianxia suddenly felt that his true qi was insufficient. Controlling the airflow with his divine sense at such a high speed consumed too much true qi. Faster see. Xianxia groaned in pain in his heart. If he had known this would happen, he would have grabbed 2 handfuls of spirit stones. The step of removing the impurities was about to succeed, but his true qi was insufficient. How could he have the energy to split his divine sense to take out spirit stones from Utopia? He could only blame himself for not having enough experience. He could only watch as the 8 balls of spiritual liquid worshipped each other. He retracted his divine sense and opened the lid. This time not only was there a ball of black ash, there was also a fragrant mist. Xianxia felt his heart ache. Xianxia could also see that Xianxia had improved compared to before. Although she had never concocted a foundation-building pill before, her cultivation level was still there. She wanted to help, but Xianxia wouldn't let her. He stubbornly insisted on doing it herself. His body had recovered to its best state. Learning from his previous lesson, he took out a few handfuls of high-grade spirit stones and put them on his belt so that he could easily get them when he needed them. When he felt that his true qi was insufficient again, Xianxia quickly took out a high-grade spirit stone from his waist and absorbed the spiritual energy into his body to replenish his true qi. After using 2 high-grade spirit stones in a row, the 8 balls of chaos finally turned into crystal-clear liquids of different colors. They floated in the furnace looking very beautiful. His divine sense controlled the airflow and rearranged the essence of the 8 spiritual herbs. The gold chaos grass was placed in the middle. Although the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs was magical, it was also very overbearing for the human body. Not to mention that taking several spiritual herbs at once was very difficult for the human body to bear. The role of the gold chaos grass was to neutralize the medicinal effect and prevent the different effects of the spiritual herbs from conflicting. The airflow rushed to the gold chaos grass spiritual liquid, divided it into 7 parts and smoothly merged with the other spiritual liquids. Then the liquid of the 100-year-old ginseng and the 100-year-old lingji was adjusted and merged into a large ball. These two were good things to replenish the vitality. A large ball of nourishing spiritual liquid was again divided into 5 groups and merged with the remaining 5 spiritual liquids. It was to supplement the body's vitality when the medicinal effect of the spiritual herbs played a role in the body, so that the body would not be damaged. After doing this, Xianxia did not dare to be careless. Now it was the most critical moment. He once again absorbed a spirit stone to replenish his true qi and restore his divine sense. After adjusting the state of his body, except for the spirit-gathering grass, the other 4 spiritual herbs rushed together. The airflow stirred them into a ball until they were mixed evenly. Then they were quickly divided into 10 equal parts and placed in the center of the furnace to be baked. His divine sense tried its best to control the high temperature in the furnace and concentrate on the 10 fist-sized liquid. Moreover, he also had to maintain the 10 balls of liquid to turn evenly. To maintain such control, the consumption of true qi and divine sense was like running water. Xianxia was miserable. Fortunately, he had the foresight to insert a pile of upper-grade spirit stones into his belt. When he felt a little exhausted, he would immediately take out a spirit stone to absorb and replenish it. Xianxia, who was on the side, was dumbfounded. She had never seen someone refine pills like this. It was simply piling up spiritual herbs and spirit stones. In just 3 months he had probably used more than 2,000 upper-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to more than 20 million lower-grade spirit stones. Anyway, as the eldest miss of the 100 Flowers Palace, she had never used so many spirit stones. The dozens of spiritual herbs were even more frightening. Even a big sect like the supporting Immortals Island could barely gather 10 sets every 3 years. Xianxia had taken out 14 sets so far. Moreover, she did not know whether he had more in his storage bag. Looking at his current state, he might really have to refine a furnace for him. Xianxia speechlessly shook her head and smiled bitterly. No wonder he wanted to refine it himself. With such a solid foundation, not only could he improve his alchemy skills, but he could also pile it up. Where did he get this thing that was comparable to the strength of a sect? The 10 fist-sized liquid gradually became dim from the beginning. Their volume also shrunk by half, and they were still shrinking. When they were the size of an egg, his divine sense quickly moved the spiritual liquid of the spirit-gathering grass to the top of the furnace. It was evenly divided into 10 parts, corresponding to the 10 balls that had just formed the pill. As they rotated at a uniform speed, the spiritual liquid of the spirit-gathering grass adhered to the surface evenly. The function of the spirit-gathering grass was to lock the medicinal efficacy of the spirit pill and prevent it from evaporating. For a foundation-building pill, even a slight loss of medicinal efficacy would be enough to affect the success or failure of a cultivator who wanted to build his foundation. After doing all this, the last step was to roast it and shape it. There should not be any more major problems. With 10 foundation-building pills in front of him, even if Xianxia could control himself, he could not help but feel a little excited. Chapter 80. The 10 foundation building pills in the furnace shook slightly. Xianxia was shocked. Since ancient times, there were many examples of people failing on the verge of success. He was secretly alarmed. He quickly calmed his mind and carefully took care of the 10 treasures. His cultivation level was not high. Refining pills in the aura refining realm was already a forced move, but it was not comparable to Ma Jiugu's abnormal cultivation level. Ma Jiugu's divine sense could freely control the pills in the furnace even though she was by the sea. Not long after, a wisp of green smoke rose from the top of the furnace, and the fragrance of pills overflowed from the furnace. Done. Although Xianxia knew it was almost done, she was still a little surprised. She had taken foundation building pills before, so she was familiar with this fragrance. It was the fragrance of foundation building pills, and it seemed to be stronger than the foundation building pills she had taken before. She secretly pondered, I wonder how many pills he can refine in this furnace? Rise. Xianxia shouted. His voice was so excited that it changed its tone. As he split the furnace lid with his palm, he quickly withdrew his divine sense. Several purple shadows rushed out of the furnace due to the oppressive airflow in the furnace. Xianxia quickly jumped up and pulled up the hem of his gown. The 10 purple shadows were all wrapped in it. After landing on the ground, he opened up the hem and a tempting smell hit his face. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He couldn't help but laugh. Fresh out of the furnace. Fresh out of the furnace foundation building pills. I've succeeded. That smug look on his face was extremely annoying. He couldn't be blamed for being like this. After pursuing it day after day, anyone would be excited when it was realized. Xianxia quickly walked over and pulled open her clothes. Inside were a bunch of shiny purple pills. After counting them, she cried out in surprise, 10 pills. She couldn't help but stretch out her slender fingers and pinch one. She could still feel the slight heat in her hand. It was a lot. She put it in front of her nose and smelled it. Its color and smell were very pure. There was a faint layer of purple light on the outside of the pill. Obviously, it was a very successful furnace of pills. Xianxia was surprised, but a trace of envy appeared on her face. Even with her cultivation level, even if she was given more than 10 sets of 9-scented spiritual grasses to concoct foundation building dawn, she wouldn't be able to guarantee that she would be able to concoct 10 foundation building dawn in one furnace. Once she left the furnace, there would definitely be a few useless foundation building dawn. Not to mention she didn't even know the specific steps and methods to concoct foundation building dawn. When the elixirs came out of the furnace just now, she clearly saw that there were 10 elixirs, no more no less. Now that they were right in front of her, there was indeed not a single useless elixir. Xianxia, who taught you this alchemy method? Xianxia asked as she put down the pill in her hand. Xianxia was looking at the pills and smiling foolishly. He didn't expect that he could concoct a furnace of pills with just a dozen sets of spiritual herbs. He had originally planned to concoct a furnace of pills with just a few dozen sets. It was really too unexpected. When he heard what she said, he put the medicinal pills into his storage bag, rubbed his nose and said with a smile, I figured it out myself. Didn't you see that I spent more than a dozen sets of spiritual plants to test it out? You figured it out yourself. Xianxia didn't suspect that he was lying and said anxiously, Xianxia, quickly memorize the steps and methods of your alchemy. You mustn't forget them. Xianxia was stunned and asked, why? Don't you know? Although we use the same spiritual plants, the steps of alchemy are different for every sect and sect. A good recipe is a priceless treasure. Xianxia poured out everything she knew. When he heard that, Xianxia was overjoyed. The alchemy sect's pill recipe jade disc was indeed not ordinary. Any random foundation building pill recipe could be treated as a treasure. That brat Lu Jingguang's castration was worth it. However, he didn't think about it. Every single pill recipe in that pill recipe jade disc, every single step and method of alchemy, were the crystallization of countless generations of the alchemy sect's painstaking efforts. If it weren't for that, with his loser standards, how could he possibly concoct a furnace of 10 pills with 100% success? Even if he did succeed, it would be strange if he didn't end up mostly crippled. It seemed like he hadn't seen the scene of crippled pills yet, so he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Xianxia wasn't prepared to tell her about the pill recipe yet. He nodded solemnly and said, Zixia, thank you for your reminder. I understand, I'll think about it carefully now. Oh right, Zixia, can you get me something to eat? I'm a little hungry. He was wholeheartedly immersed in alchemy, and indeed hadn't eaten a drop of water for 2 days. Okay, I'll go get it for you now. Before Yan Zixia left, she didn't forget to remind him, you must remember this. After she left, Yu Qianchou mumbled, remember my ass. I've remembered it since a year ago. Now I should think about what to do. I don't know if this girl's mouth is tight or not. No, 10 foundation building dawn is really not enough. Aside from myself, there's still Guan Yu, Qin Feng and Little Tian. In the future there might be even more lackeys waiting for me to subdue. Not to mention, I don't know how many foundation building dawn I'll use to successfully build my foundation. It seems like I can't be in a hurry to build my foundation right now. Yan Zixia flew back and forth by herself, so she came back very quickly. Not only did she bring the barbecued meat that Yu Qianchou liked to eat, she also brought a bottle of wine. She seemed to be congratulating him. After Yu Qianchou ate and drank to his heart's content, he patted his stomach and said, I've already memorized it. Now let's confirm the effect. With a successful experience, it would save a lot of time and effort to concoct again. When the furnace of foundation building dawn came out, Yan Zixia was speechless. Unexpectedly, there were 10 foundation building dawn in each furnace, and there wasn't a single waste dan. The success rate was a bit too high. Even if it was her great-grandmother, she might not necessarily be able to do it. After more than 10 furnaces, because he had been concocting the same kind of dan, he was already familiar with the things he needed to pay attention to. As the saying goes, practice makes perfect. When he had concocted the 50th batch, he had a fixed pattern. The control of the spiritual liquid inside the furnace was as easy as blowing off dust. He also knew how to control the heat flow inside the furnace by borrowing force. A furnace of dawn came out without using a single spirit stone. If other people saw this, who would believe that this was a chi refining stage disciple concocting dawn? However, no one could be like him, using a pile of precious spiritual herbs and high-grade spirit stones to practice. Towards the end, when a furnace of foundation building dawn came out, there was no joy or worry on his face. He was already numb, as if concocting foundation building dawn was as easy as eating a meal. Even Yan Zixia, who was watching from the side, was a bit numb. After concocting 100 batches of spiritual herbs, a full 10 days had passed. During this time, 1 furnace of dawn was destroyed, and it was due to his carelessness. Counting the 100 batches of spiritual herbs, he had actually succeeded in concocting 96 batches. Each batch contained 10 dawn. He had already concocted 960 foundation building dawn. The earth fire that had been burning under the furnace for more than 10 days was finally sealed. Yu Qianchou clapped his hands and exhaled, saying, I'm done. Yan Zixia had also forgotten to count how many furnaces he had concocted. She walked over and asked, You're not concocting anymore? To be honest, watching someone do the same thing every day knowing the result was really boring. I'm not concocting anymore. I've already memorized the method. It seems that the concocting method I figured out is still so. Yu Qianchou smiled. Yan Zixia rolled her eyes at him. She didn't care what he said. She had already thought it through. No matter how good the recipe was, she was too embarrassed to ask for it. If she asked for it and he didn't give it to her, wouldn't that be too embarrassing? After all, it was not an ordinary pill recipe. Even if he gave it to her, she would owe him a huge favor. How was she supposed to repay him in the future? Chapter 81. The air was fresh, the sky was blue, the grass was green, the river was flowing, and Yan Zixia's figure was curvy. Along the way, Yu Qianchou was in a good mood. He had more than 900 foundation building pills on him. He believed that no matter how bad his aptitude was, he could still succeed in building his foundation. Qianchou. Yes. Are you going to prepare to build your foundation when you go back? Yan Zixia asked. Yu Qianchou answered without hesitation, yes. Do you still remember that you owe me a song? Yu Qianchou smiled and said, I remember. I've been busy concocting pills recently. After I build my foundation, I'll definitely think of a song for you. He didn't really want to give her a song at that time and was just perfunctory. Now he couldn't think of a suitable song for her. After walking for a while, Yan Zixia asked again, Do you want me to protect you when you build your foundation? Heh. No need. I'll just find a quiet place to hide. Yu Qianzhou refused. He also knew that no one could disturb him when he was building his foundation. Otherwise he might go berserk. However, there was probably no safer place than Utopia in this world. He didn't even tell Chu Pinger about that place, and it was not convenient to tell her now. Seeing that he refused, Yan Zixiao bit her lip and didn't say anything. In his previous life, Yu Qianzhou was also a person who often visited flowers. Naturally, he could see that she was unhappy because of his refusal. He leaned over without hesitation, raised his hand and slapped her perky buttocks. Yan Zixiao screamed. She was accidentally attacked by the bad guy again. She blushed and quickly ran to the side. The assailant laughed proudly. After returning to the mulberry garden, the couple went back to their respective homes. When he returned to the house, the scene in front of him made Yu Qianzhou slightly stunned. Furong was actually covered with a quilt and lying on the bed with her back facing the outside. It was a bit unbelievable. Usually, even at night, she would sit cross-legged on the bed and cultivate. Martial Aunt Furong. Are you alright? Yu Qianzhou asked. Furong didn't say anything. Her head was also covered with the quilt, so she couldn't see what was wrong with her. Raising his hand, he wanted to pull the blanket away to take a look, but after thinking about it, he gave up. No matter how ugly she was still a woman. She was kind enough to let him stay with her, but he was pulling her blanket. What was going on? Martial uncle, are you asleep? Yu Qianzhou shouted again. Hibiscus still didn't respond. It was a little strange. Yu Qianzhou shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He would go back to build his foundation first. He would come back to ask after he succeeded. He disappeared from his bed. If there was anyone that Guan Yu and Qin Feng missed the most during this period of time, it would undoubtedly be their boss, Yu Qianzhou. He had been gone for more than 10 days. There was no news at all. The two of them were worried sick. Even if he couldn't refine the foundation building pill, he should at least come back and say hello. We don't blame you. In any case, there are plenty of spiritual herbs. You just have to continue working hard. The two of them lay on the bamboo pavilion's stone platform listlessly. They didn't have the energy to do anything. The days of waiting were so painful. In the distance, Little Red Rabbit and Bai Suzhen wandered about in the sea of flowers. Boss is back. Qin Feng's eyes lit up and he stood up. Where? Guan Yu's back was facing the outside, so he didn't see it for a moment. When he turned around, he saw Yu Qianzhou walking over from the forest listlessly just like them. Guan Yu and Qin Feng looked at each other, a bad premonition spreading in their eyes. The pill concoction this time was probably fraught with grim possibilities. Otherwise they wouldn't have seen boss like this. From the moment Yu Qianzhou appeared, Bai Suzhen already knew. Looking from afar, she couldn't help but frown. The former's dejected appearance fell into her eyes. She patted the little colt and said, Red Rabbit, let's go back. Boss. You're back. Guan Yu and Qin Feng walked out of the courtyard made of bamboo and welcomed him together. They both wanted to ask how the pill concoction was going, but when they saw boss's appearance, they couldn't bring themselves to ask. The two of them hugged him and sat down in the bamboo pavilion. Yu Qianzhou rested his elbow on the stone platform, his fingers pinching his forehead silently. Not long after, Bai Suzhen leisurely walked into the courtyard and asked, What's wrong? Yeah. Boss, what's wrong? Boss, if there's anything, just say it. We're not outsiders here. When Bai Suzhen opened her mouth, the two of them couldn't wait to ask about it, but they just had to avoid the thing they wanted to know the most. How was the foundation building pill going? Yu Qianzhou secretly laughed in his heart. Let's see how long you can hold it in. He waved his hand at them and said, Nothing much, I'm just really tired these few days. I'll be fine after some rest. After dilly-dallying for a while, Qin Feng finally couldn't help but ask, Boss, have you concocted the foundation building pill? Yu Qianzhou straightforwardly said, I have. Guan Yu's eyes lit up and he asked, How's the concoction going? Yu Qianzhou indifferently said, Nothing much. Hearing this, the two of them's expressions darkened and Qin Feng said regretfully, Did they all fail? What did you say? Yu Qianzhou's beady eyes widened and he said, Have you ever seen me fail? Every time he encountered such a situation, he would always think of a way to increase his boss's prestige without holding back. Bai Suzhen, who had always been a bystander, was the clearest about this. She knew what he was going to do, so she turned around and smiled. Guan Yu and Qin Feng looked at each other and they instantly became excited. The former stuttered, "Boss, where's the foundation? Foundation building pill? Where is it?" This was the thing that Guan Yu had been looking forward to the most since he was chased out of Fuxian Island, so how could he not be excited? Qin Feng, on the other hand, never thought that this day would really come. Two useless things. A mere foundation building pill can make you so excited. How are you going to do great things with me in the future? Calm down, you have to be calm, you have to be as calm as me, understand? Yu Qianzhou said disdainfully. As he spoke, he took out 2 purple pills from his storage bag, and the fragrance of the pills instantly filled the bamboo pavilion. Even Bai Suzhen couldn't help but take a few more glances. The two of them repeatedly admitted their mistakes. Yes, yes, yes. However, their eyes were fixed on the 2 purple pills. Guan Yu even cried out in surprise, "It's really the foundation building pill." He had taken 3 before, but unfortunately he didn't succeed in building his foundation, so he naturally recognized it. The 2 quail-sized foundation building pills were pinched in his palm and he put them away. Guan Yu and Qin Feng were stunned. They didn't know what boss meant. Could it be that he didn't want to give them to them? Yu Qianzhou held the foundation building pills with his hands behind his back, and said with a serious expression, "Don't worry, I will definitely give you these foundation building pills. Also, I will give you a choice. I will give each of you 1 foundation building pill. If you are willing to leave, I will let you go, and I will even beg my sister to return your natal primordial spirits, and from then on, we will have nothing to do with each other. There is another choice, I will still give you the foundation building pills. You can choose to stay, but from then on, you have to sincerely treat me as boss and follow my orders. Think about it. Guan Yu, I know you have always been unconvinced by me as boss, you go first." The two of them looked at each other. They didn't know why Yu Qianzhou would say this. Bai Suzhen also looked over in shock. After a moment of silence, it was Qin Feng who took a step forward, bowed and said, "From now on, Qin Feng will only follow boss's orders. I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me." When he first arrived, he really didn't like Yu Qianzhou, but after being fooled a few times, he naturally didn't know that he was being fooled, so he already had some sort of blind worship for Yu Qianzhou, which was why he swore such a heavy oath. Yu Qianzhou nodded his head in satisfaction, then turned his gaze to Guan Yu. Guan Yu hesitated. He was much older than Qin Feng, so his eyes were naturally more mature. Actually, it didn't matter if he stayed, and it didn't matter if he sincerely treated Yu Qianzhou as boss. The key was that the temptation of the natal primordial spirit was too great. At least from now on he wouldn't be controlled by others at all times. But with 1 foundation building pill, could he really build his foundation successfully? If he couldn't build his foundation successfully, what could he do even if he left? On the contrary, since Yu Qianzhou could successfully refine it the first time, he could refine it a second and a third time. What this place didn't lack the least were spiritual herbs. Most importantly, even if he wanted to leave, would Yu Qianzhou really let him go? Wasn't he afraid that he would leak the secret here? Thinking of this, Guan Yu was a little annoyed. Qin Feng, this be asterisk starred. So be it. Why did he have to make such a heavy oath? It should be known that cultivators, regardless of their cultivation, were different from ordinary people in the secular world. Once they made an oath, if they went against it, it would come true. But since he had already made an oath, it wouldn't be right if he didn't. After hesitating for a while, Guan Yu gritted his teeth, bowed and said, "From now on, Guan Yu will only follow boss's orders. I will not have any other thoughts. If I go against this oath, may the heavens and earth destroy me." "Good," Yu Qianzhou shouted. He turned his back to the two of them and raised his head to laugh. Suddenly he turned around and glanced at the two of them coldly. His eyes were cold and emotionless, and a decisive and domineering aura surged out from his body. Under that aura, Guan Yu and Qin Feng actually subconsciously took a step back. The two of them were shocked. Bai Suzhen didn't blink. This was the first time she saw Yu Qianzhou with such an aura. In the blink of an eye, it was as if he had changed into a different person. It was as if she didn't recognize him. She could be considered to have seen the world. This kind of aura could only be emitted by someone who had been in a high position for a long time and was iron-blooded and murderous. It wasn't something that could be faked. Yu Qianzhou glanced at the two of them coldly and finally landed on Guan Yu. He stared for a long time until the latter felt a little scared. Then he slowly said, "One day the two of you will be proud of your choice." Qin Feng's mouth opened slightly and he swallowed with difficulty. He never thought that boss had such a side to him. He was really unfathomable. The admiration in his heart couldn't help but increase a little. Just when the few of them were shocked, Yu Qianzhou suddenly returned to his usual smiling expression, making Guan Yu and Qin Feng very uncomfortable. Yu Qianzhou took out his hand from behind his back and spread out the 2 foundation building pills in his palm. He smiled at the 2 of them and said, "Each of you can take one. I wish the 2 of you succeed in building your foundation soon." Chapter 82. The 2 of them were still not used to his fickleness. They nervously took a foundation building pill each and bowed together. "Thank you, boss." Yu Qianzhou smiled. "What are you thanking me for? Let's quickly find a place to build our foundation." The 2 of them excitedly returned to their respective rooms in the bamboo house. As he watched the 2 of them leave, Yu Qianzhou narrowed his eyes. A cold light flashed in his eyes. If someone had really chosen to leave just now, he would not have hesitated to kill them. Apart from being afraid of revealing his secret, he could strongly feel that after passing the foundation building stage, their future path would be different. He could guarantee that the 2 of them would definitely succeed in building their foundation because he had enough foundation building pills in his hands. However, he did not need a disloyal subordinate. With the small interlude just now, if the 2 of them failed to build their foundation, he would once again take out foundation building pills for them. Every time they failed, he would give them another foundation building pill until they succeeded. He believed that repeated efforts would be more touching than a one-time effort. This was also the reason why he did not tell the 2 of them that he had a lot of foundation building pills. If he wanted to become a real boss, the necessary strategy was unavoidable. It was not to target someone. Returning to his senses, he took out a foundation building pill. With a light leap, he simply sat cross-legged on the stone platform. He turned his head towards Bai Suzhen in the courtyard and smiled. He opened his mouth and swallowed the foundation building pill. The pill tasted a little sweet and bitter. Before he could recover from the taste, it had already slipped into his stomach. He slowly closed his eyes and began to circulate his qi. Not long after, his body trembled as if he had been struck by lightning. A warm current surged from his abdomen to his surroundings, rushing to every part of his body. The strength was very strong and very overbearing. The Dan was refined by Yu Qianzhou himself. He knew that the effect of the forging tendon grass in the building foundation Dan had begun to take effect. The effect of the forging tendon grass was to destroy and expand the tendons and veins in the body. It could be regarded as one of the most important spirit herbs in the building foundation Dan. Equally important was the ice spirit seed. It had the effect of repairing the tendons and veins. In the beginning it felt like a hot current, but soon it felt like a volcano was about to erupt. Wave after wave of the foundation building pellet rushed into every part of his body. It was so painful that he wanted to die. After a while, Yu Qianzhou felt like his soul had left his body. He didn't expect that the medicinal effect of the foundation building pellet would be so overbearing. If he waited until the medicinal effect of the whole foundation building pellet completely dissolved, he really didn't know how he would be able to endure it. If he could see his appearance now, he would definitely be shocked. The pores all over his body began to ooze black mucus. It was the first time for Bai Suzhen to see a person take a Dan to build his foundation. The painful expression on Yu Qianzhou's face made her frown slightly. She was a demon, not a human, so she didn't need to take the Dan to improve her cultivation. However, demon cultivators also had their own way of suffering to improve their cultivation, which was no less than that of humans. Yu Qianzhou really felt that he couldn't endure it anymore. He had already entered a semi-conscious state. Suddenly, a warm current went straight up his back and rushed into his brain. His muddle-headed brain instantly became sober. The medicinal effect of the heart-guarding orchid had taken effect. It was still okay if he was not sober. Once he was sober, he could clearly feel the pain his body was enduring. At this time, he could no longer operate his cultivation to dissolve the Dan. All of his true qi had retracted back into his dantian. The tendons and veins in his body had been destroyed by the forging tendon grass, so he could no longer operate his cultivation normally. He could only rely on the building foundation Dan to operate on his own. Yu Qianqiu secretly smiled bitterly. His body felt like it was being roasted by fire and cut by thousands of knives. Because of the effect of the heart-guarding orchid, he could endure all of this with a clear mind. He estimated that he wouldn't be able to stop for at least 2 or 3 hours. Just when he was in so much pain that he wanted to scream, he didn't know how much time had passed. A cool feeling flowed from his abdomen to all parts of his body. The ice spirit seed that Yu Qianqiu had been looking forward to for a long time finally took effect. The broken tendons and veins began to repair. Wherever the cool feeling went, the tendons and veins gradually recovered. The heat in his body began to disperse. The places that had been cut by thousands of knives also felt like being gently caressed by a breeze. The comfortable feeling was indescribable. Yu Qianqiu felt so comfortable that he wanted to moan. Time passed slowly. What followed was the medicinal effect of the diamond fruit. It brought a slight electric shock numbness. The numbness spread along the tendons and veins, stabilizing the damaged and repaired tendons and veins. This feeling was neither painful nor uncomfortable. It was thousands of times better than the tyranny of the tendon-forging grass. When all of the sensations receded like the tide, Yu Qianqiu felt a little drowsy. His whole body, including his spirit, felt very tired. He wanted to sleep. The destruction of his body and the reconstruction of it had consumed too much of his yuan qi. Fortunately, the 100-year ginseng and 100-year ganoderma contained in the pill were great for replenishing his yuan qi. Otherwise, he would have died a long time ago with just the yuan qi in his body. He shook his head to dispel the drowsiness. He operated his martial arts to check his body. The result was very painful. He had failed to build his foundation. Just now he felt that his whole body was suffering, but in fact only about 1/10 of the tendons and veins in his body had expanded. In other words, the foundation-building pill had only allowed less than 1/10 of the body to build his foundation. In short, he had failed to build his foundation. Helplessly opening his eyes, he found Bai Suzhen standing in front of him with an inquiring expression. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and smiled bitterly. Just as he opened his mouth, he was shocked by his own voice. His voice was so hoarse that it didn't sound like he was speaking. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and prepared to accept his own voice. He said, "Sister, I failed." Bai Suzhen frowned. At this time, Guan Yu and Qin Feng also rushed out of the bamboo house at the same time. The 3 people who had just built their foundation looked at each other, then looked at their own bodies. They found that their bodies were covered in a layer of black sticky substance. The 3 of them asked in a croaky voice whether they had succeeded or failed to build their foundation. In the end, they all failed. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the spirit stones outside and said in a hoarse voice, "Everyone, don't be discouraged. First, use the spirit stones to recover your strength. I still have some foundation-building pills here." As he said that, he took out 2 foundation-building pills and threw them over. The 2 of them caught them and nodded their heads in joy to express their gratitude. Then they quickly ran over to the pile of spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically at Bai Suzhen and immediately took out a spirit stone to recover his body. The latter slightly shook her head. After recovering his strength, he swallowed another foundation-building pill. The same pain began again. Judging from the result of building his foundation just now, he reckoned that he wouldn't succeed this time. As expected, he failed again. Dejectedly, Guan Yu walked over with his head hung low. He also failed again. Surprisingly, among the 3, Qin Feng succeeded the second time. After using 2 foundation-building pills, Qin Feng was so excited that he almost went crazy. He ran to Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the stone platform, and kowtowed. It was obvious that he was sincerely grateful to Yu Qianqiu. Damn it! This time he really lost face. As the boss, he actually lost to the little brother. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. He was very ashamed. Luckily, his face was covered by the black mucus, so his expression couldn't be seen. He threw another foundation-building pill to Guan Yu and swallowed one himself. In the end, the 2 unlucky fellows still failed. Yu Qianqiu made up his mind and threw one foundation-building pill after another to Guan Yu. He also swallowed one after another, but he still failed again and again. When the 2 of them used the 7th foundation-building pill, Guan Yu screamed in the bamboo house. He also succeeded. He rushed out and knelt in front of Yu Qianqiu. He kowtowed heavily a few times with sincerity. 7 foundation building pills. Even if he had 2 immortal supporting badges and could return to Fuxian Island twice, he would only get 6 foundation building pills. He still wouldn't succeed. He couldn't repay this kindness. These were his heartfelt words. Yu Qianqiu felt ashamed to face the two of them, but he didn't know that Qin Feng, who had washed himself clean, was secretly worshipping his boss. His boss actually had so many foundation building pills that cultivators treated as treasures. He swallowed them one by one like they were candy. Who else in the cultivation world was more awesome than his boss? After all, foundation building pills were foundation building pills, not candy. There would definitely be an effect if he ate a lot of them. When the 12th foundation building pill's medicinal effects completely dissolved, Yu Qianqiu's body trembled. He felt like he was floating and all the cells in his body seemed to have been reborn. The vital energy in his dantian automatically flowed into his meridians and circulated rapidly, turning into liquid vital energy before returning to his dantian. His body was so light and the range of his divine sense had doubled. This kind of wonderful feeling was something that he couldn't feel when he was climbing the Qi refinement realm. Yu Qianqiu knew that he had succeeded. He directly bounced up from the stone platform, broke through the bamboo pavilion and landed in the courtyard. Following that, he let out a long roar. The entire utopia's expression changed, and the ground seemed to be trembling and buzzing in response to his roar. The people in the courtyard almost couldn't stand steadily. Everyone was shocked, not knowing why Yu Qianqiu would have such a reaction after successfully building his foundation building pill. Chapter 83. The sky rumbled, and the originally white sky where the sun could not be seen suddenly became cloudy and clear. After a few moments, there was another loud noise in the sky, and the white mist suddenly gathered and scattered, changing its color, forming a dense layer of dark clouds, within which there were constantly sounds of thunder accompanied by lightning. The sky changed color. What was going on? They had never seen such a thing before. Facing the might of heaven and earth, that kind of powerful momentum made them feel powerless. Everyone felt like they had become ants and their faces changed color. Bai Suzhen knew that after Yu Qianqiu's cultivation increased, the space's territory would also expand. She had also seen it before, but she had never seen such a scene. Looking at the lightning in the dark clouds, that powerful force that could destroy everything, Bai Suzhen's face flashed with a trace of panic. Could it be that the final stage of her heavenly tribulation had arrived? Yu Qianqiu stared at the sky. Suddenly, his heart felt as if everything in the world was waiting for something. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and faced the heaven and earth with his arms spread out. His divine sense expanded infinitely, gradually becoming one with the heaven and earth. Feeling the frequency of the heaven and earth, Yu Qianqiu's mouth revealed a trace of a smile. "They are waiting for my call. Come." Yu Qianqiu gently smiled and spread out his arms. He raised his head and stuck out his chest, standing in the shape of the character. An unknown force slowly lifted him into the sky. Guan Yu, Qin Feng and Bai Suzhen were dumbfounded, not knowing what he was going to do. After his body rose to a certain position in the sky, Yu Qianqiu fiercely opened his eyes. In an instant the lightning in the clouds became more and more restless. The lightning flashed and the thunder roared. First, a bolt of lightning quickly struck towards him, followed by countless bolts of lightning rushing towards him. All the lightning was released from the clouds, and with him as the end point, it weaved into a huge ball of light. "Boss!" Qin Feng cried out in alarm. The three's faces turned pale. Being struck by so many lightning bolts, no one would be able to survive. How could this be? Bai Suzhen clenched her teeth and flew towards the ball of light in the sky. She wanted to save Yu Qianqiu regardless of whether he was dead or alive. Just as Bai Suzhen was about to get close to the ball of lightning, a bolt of lightning as thick as a water tank struck directly at her from the clouds. Bai Suzhen was shocked. She used all her strength of transcending tribulation to send out a dazzling white light, which fiercely collided with the lightning bolt. Bang! The powerful shockwaves caused Guan Yu and Qin Feng to fall to the ground. The two of them sat on the ground with their mouths agape. To be able to fight against such a powerful sky lightning, that level of cultivation was simply too shocking. It was something that they did not even dare to imagine. The birds and beasts that were roaming around were running around in all directions. After the loud sound, Bai Suzhen raised her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was sent flying diagonally to one side. Before she fell, another lightning bolt, which was twice as thick as the previous one, chased after her. A trace of despair flashed across Bai Suzhen's face. That attack just now had exhausted all of her cultivation. She could no longer resist. Stop! A loud shout came from the sky. The lightning bolt that chased after her instantly disappeared without a trace. Bai Suzhen safely fell into the sea of flowers. Her hair was messy and her clothes were untidy. She slowly stood up and helplessly looked at the sky. Sister, don't worry. I'm fine. Yu Qianzhou's comforting voice came from the sky. After he finished speaking, the lightning bolts in the sky gradually disappeared back into the clouds. The black clouds also stopped surging. The earth also became quiet. Yu Qianzhou stood in midair unscathed. He crossed his arms over his chest and suddenly shouted, "Open!" He pushed his arms to the left and right as if he was pushing away something extremely heavy. The earth trembled once again. The purple chaos that surrounded the sky and connected the earth quickly spread into the distance. The dark clouds in the sky churned again. They began to scatter from the center, chasing after the purple chaos in the distance. A piece of sky that was as blue velvet also spread out with the dark clouds. Suddenly, when the dark clouds retreated, they left behind a blazing sun in the blue sky, shining brightly on the earth. The clouds in the sky disappeared, and the earth was as calm as before. The sky that was originally hazy was replaced by a blue sky and a blazing sun. Yu Qianzhou was like a god who had created the world. He still stood in the sky, his clothes fluttering in the wind. Floating in the sky, he looked around. Utopia's territory had doubled in size again. Without a doubt, his cultivation level had increased again. He had finally broken through to the foundation establishment stage that he had been dreaming of. Yu Qianzhou could not help but laugh out loud in the sky. It had indeed calmed down. Guan Yu and Qin Feng got up and looked around, not knowing what to do. When they heard their boss' proud laughter, the two of them looked over at the same time. They turned their heads and looked at each other. F***CK. There was a strange cry in the sky. The two of them hurriedly looked over and saw Yu Qianzhou's limbs flapping as he turned into a black shadow and fell straight down. With a cry, he landed in the courtyard with his limbs facing the sky. Unreasonable. Yu Qianzhou lay on the ground and stared at the sky with his eyes wide open. He had been floating in the air with ease a moment ago. It was as if he could control the unknown power in the unseen world at will. The feeling of controlling the world was really good. Why did they suddenly lose contact with each other? It was as if everything that had happened just now was a dream, and the fall had woken him up. He moved his limbs that were about to fall apart and twisted his neck. Guan Yu and Qin Feng stood at the side and looked at him in bewilderment. Yu Qianzhou groaned. "What are you looking at? Quick, help me up. Damn it, I nearly fell to my death." The two of them helped him up hesitantly. How did their boss, who had been like a god just now, become like this in the blink of an eye? His clothes were tattered, and the black marks left on his body after he built his foundation establishment were gone. He was no different from a beggar. Ouch. Yu Qianzhou stood up and groaned. He looked around. The bamboo house had all collapsed and the trees in the forest were all over the place. The entire sea of flowers had also been destroyed. All of this proved that what had happened earlier was real and not a dream. Thinking of this, Yu Qianzhou said anxiously, "Where's my sister? Quick, help me to my sister's place." Actually, when Bai Suzhen saw him falling from the sky, she had already rushed over. As soon as she arrived, she heard her brother asking for her anxiously. She couldn't help but have a gentle expression on her face. She said softly, "I'm here." Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned around. Bai Suzhen's beautiful hair was messy, and her clothes were untidy. Her pale face was barely able to hang a smile, and the trace of blood at the corner of her mouth was eye-catching. Since the first time Yu Qianzhou saw her, she had always been gentle and quiet. Her body was always clean and spotless. Her beautiful and dignified appearance was unique in the world. When had she ever looked so battered and exhausted? She was trying to save him with her life just now. It was all his fault for being careless. Yu Qianzhou felt a sharp pain in his heart. He was extremely regretful and his eyes were slightly moist. He pushed away the two people who were supporting him, and before his body could recover, he staggered over and hugged Bai Suzhen tightly. He kept blaming himself. It's all my fault. It's all my fault. I didn't pay attention just now and that's why you got injured. Bai Sujian's pale face had a layer of red. In more than 200 years, this was the first time she was hugged by a man and it was a very tight hug. There were people watching from the side. She used a bit of strength to push Yu Qianqiu away. She shook her head and said, I'm fine. It's just that I used up too much of my vitality and I'm a little weak. Are you all right? Yu Qianqiu also felt that he had unintentionally taken advantage of her. He scratched his head and said with a smile, I'm fine, I'm fine. It's just that my body is a little numb from the fall and I haven't recovered yet. I'll be fine in a while. As he said that, he even used his fist to hit his chest, indicating that he was fine. Bai Sujian nodded and looked at him. She said softly, Go wash up. After saying that, she found a clean corner in the courtyard and sat down cross-legged with her eyes closed. Knowing that she wanted to recover her lost vitality, Yu Qianqiu looked at his body and said to his two subordinates, My limbs are still a little weak. I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me to wash up by the lake. The two nodded and supported him on his left and right. When they passed by the destroyed sea of flowers, Yu Qianqiu sighed, I made a little too much of a commotion just now. The two of you should fix it up again when you have time. My sister likes flowers. Also, I'll leave the ruined bamboo house in your hands. It was rare for Guan Yu and Qin Feng to say in unison, yes. When they walked to the lake, they realized that their bodies seemed to have returned to normal. They tried to move around and there was still a little discomfort, but there was no other reaction. Yu Qianqiu quickly took off his clothes and happily jumped into the lake. He was an expert swimmer in his previous life. At this moment he was swimming freestyle butterfly breaststroke. All kinds of swimming styles that Guan Yu and Qin Feng had never seen before were displayed. Qin Feng couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. After today, his admiration for Boss skyrocketed. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.